Chapter 780. How should he put it? It should be said that his life was as ordinary as a textbook for the first 35 years of his life. Ordinary junior high school, ordinary college, and then the life of an ordinary office worker. He ran business, sold insurance, worked as a security guard for a few months, and also worked as a part-time worker in a territory. In the end, he became a hawker who sold fish balls in a cart. His father passed away a few years ago, and he still had an old mother at home. Now he lived in his sister's house, and he only saw her a few times during the Mid-Autumn Festival. He didn't have his own property, and the place he lived in now was a few years ago, and the rent had doubled by now. Yu Danxiang wanted to heroically say in front of the fat landlady, "I don't want to rent this lousy place anymore," but the rent outside was a bit more expensive. He didn't have a girlfriend, so he usually went to the red light district to satisfy his physiological needs. Every day, he stayed in front of his fishball stall, and when there were customers, he would grab a few bowls of fish balls or cook some hot and sour noodles. When there was no one around, he would sit down and read newspapers, novels, or watch TV. His favorite drink was Budweiser, and his favorite meal was the egg noodles under the apartment building. His favorite place was a foot massage center not far from the apartment. He didn't have a girlfriend and lived alone. He thought of raising a kitten or a puppy, but he thought that it was too troublesome to clean feces, so he gave up. When he was a child, he liked to read a manga called Fist of the North Star, and he still liked it now, but he was too embarrassed to read it in front of others. Am I really a good-for-nothing? Thinking of this, Yu Danxiang didn't feel as excited as he imagined when he heard this cute little girl in a swimsuit call him. Even if he was excited, he actually didn't dare to show it. This was a little girl who could fly. Furthermore, she was in this strange place. Who knew what kind of terrifying methods the other party had up their sleeves? At this time, the swimsuit girl's eyes fell on the token in Yu Danxiang's hand, and slightly opened her mouth in surprise. Eternal Night Command? Why do you have this thing? Eternal Night Command? Yu Danxiang subconsciously looked at the strange token he picked up. This swimsuit girl seemed to recognize it. Yu Danxiang immediately quivered. Little girl, do you recognize this thing? I picked it up and brought it to this place. Since you recognize it, can you send me back? I promise I won't say anything about this place. Although he was a good-for-nothing uncle, Yu Danxiang clearly knew that he had unintentionally been drawn into a terrifying whirlpool. He just wanted to get out of this situation. Being a good-for-nothing was better than losing his life. The Eternal Night Medallion can be picked up so easily. Do you think I'm an idiot? The swimsuit girl's tone suddenly became unfriendly. The girl's gaze suddenly became fierce, like a sharp sword light, which made Yu Danxiang's heart tremble. He secretly thought that this little girl was very scary. I really was picked up. Yu Danxiang quickly explained the cause and effect of his arrival here. A fat guy? Can it rise back up after being flattened? Brother Xiaosheng? Chains. The swimsuit girl frowned. I know you're talking about a fat guy. And the Eternal Night Medallion in your hand actually belongs to that fat guy. But I'm curious, how did you, an ordinary person, manage to drive the Eternal Night Medallion to the crevice? As for the chains you're talking about, every time the swimsuit girl asked a question, Yu Danxiang's face turned ugly. Obviously, he wanted to say something but didn't know what to say. He was indeed just an ordinary, good-for-nothing uncle with no redeeming qualities. If there was any redeeming quality, it was probably that he was a human with a true soul. I understand. The swimsuit girl relaxed her brows. Yu Danxiang didn't even have time to be afraid, but asked curiously, what do you understand? Dong Zhuo might have encountered some trouble at that time, so he planned to use the Eternal Night Medallion to return. But he didn't succeed in the end, and it was picked up by Brother Xiaosheng. That's why the Eternal Night Medallion was left behind, and you accidentally picked it up. Yu Danxiang said with his mouth wide open, but I don't know how to use this thing. Could it be that I have a legendary special physique that can trigger this thing to activate itself? It's an illusion of life, thinking that you're the protagonist. The swimsuit girl said indifferently, the Eternal Night Medallion won't stop after it's activated. Although Dong Zhuo was taken away, it just kept on activating. You happened to pick it up, and it transported you back. You don't have to think about it. You have neither natural talent nor bone structure. You are indeed a piece of trash. I'm really sorry. Okay, I'm a good for nothing anyway. I'm worthless. Why don't you send me back? I promise I won't say anything. Yu Danxiang patted his chest and said, I'm not good at anything else, but I'm good at keeping secrets. The swimsuit girl said expressionlessly, better than a dead person? In an instant, Yu Danxiang felt as if he had fallen into a freezer. Cold air rushed from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, and he collapsed to the ground, his legs trembling slightly. However, at this moment, a sharp and terrifying cry suddenly sounded from behind Yu Danxiang, causing his ears to hurt. He instinctively turned his head to look, and his scalp immediately went numb. He saw that in the endless chaotic void in front of the platform, swarms of terrifying creatures were flying over. They were humanoid in shape, but they looked like monsters molded out of mud. On their backs were tattered bat-like wings that were almost rotten. Their facial features couldn't be seen, and their eyes and mouths were just empty holes. What are these things? Yu Danxiang got up, his whole body trembling. It was too terrifying. It was like doomsday. There were hundreds and thousands of these monsters, and they were all flying toward this place at high speed. Looking at their posture, Yu Danxiang thought of locusts passing by. Original Void Devil, a life form unique to the crevices on both sides. They can be seen everywhere here, the swimsuit girl said calmly. But they're rarely seen on this scale recently. Is he your... Fishball Chong suddenly remembered the fatty who couldn't be killed, so he quickly changed his words. Is he your enemy? Are they here for you? The swimsuit girl looked at Yu Danxiang and said, The original Void Devil is here for you. You're a true soul, and to the original Void Devil, you're the most delicious thing in the world. I'm afraid all the original Void Devils wandering around here have smelled your scent as soon as you appeared. Yu Danxiang subconsciously took a few steps back and approached the swimsuit girl. However, he suddenly heard the girl's cold snort, and he stopped in his tracks, trembling in fear. He could only plead, Save me, but the swimsuit girl didn't say a word, and her eyes were cold and detached. Yu Danxiang's heart was beating like a drum, thinking that these terrifying monsters were coming for him, and that he was in their territory. Come to think of it, the huge palace on this platform often fought with these monsters. Now that he had led their enemies to their doorstep, they must be unhappy. Would he die? Yu Danxiang knelt on the ground powerlessly, his eyes full of despair. Facing those terrifying monsters close at hand, Yu Danxiang could even imagine himself being torn apart and devoured by these monsters in the next instant. Indeed, he was just a good-for-nothing at this moment. An even more terrifying and shrill roar came from the large number of original Void Devils. The large number of Void original demons made way for him, as though they were terrified. At the same time, a huge monster more than 10 times the size of these original Void Devils charged madly from behind. Oh, even the Void Yuan Master is here? The swimsuit girl looked up. Looks like you animals have been starving for too long. It's just the most ordinary true soul. And you're all attracted here? That monster more than 10 times the size was completely different from the other original Void Devils. Its shape resembled a rotting Western dragon. This Void Yuan Master was roaring madly at the swimsuit girl. Its wings suddenly spread open, and its huge mouth opened at the same time, spitting out a gray ball of light. The swimsuit girl didn't move at all, facing this huge gray ball of light. She softly murmured, Ganjiang, Emosia. At this moment, 2 simple long swords appeared on the swimsuit girl's left and right. Then, with a swing of the swords, they flew out together, stabbing at the gray ball of light. Yu Danxiang didn't know if this gray ball of light was powerful, but he knew that this Void Yuan Master must be very terrifying. Otherwise, it wouldn't make so many original Void Devils move aside. Even if there was only one original Void Devil, if it was released to the outside world, it would probably scare people to death. The 2 simple long swords directly broke through the ball of light, and without losing momentum, they directly stabbed at the Void Yuan Master's head. That Void Yuan Master didn't seem to be able to dodge in time, and its pair of broken wings were directly cut in half by the two swords. It let out a shrill cry, and the terrifying number of original void devils in the surroundings seemed to have gone mad. They all flew out, dauntlessly charging at the swimsuit girl. The swimsuit girl snorted coldly again, and the two simple long swords instantly turned back in the chaotic void. 1 into 2, 2 into 4. The two simple long swords actually split into over 100 sword lights at this moment. The sword lights formed groups of 4, forming a wheel. They rapidly rotated and scattered above the huge platform. Countless original void devils were crazily cut down by these sword lights. A large number of original void devils were cut down. Faced with the continuous miserable cries, Yu Danxiang's face was already pale. In the end, he even forgot to be afraid and just stared blankly at the invincible back of this swimsuit girl. With a miserable cry, the Void Yuan Master's huge figure was already far away from this place, as if it was fleeing for its life. As for the original void devils that were attracted, they had all been cut down by this swimsuit girl's sword at this moment. When all the sword lights disappeared and finally turned into two simple long swords and fell back to the girl's side, she looked at the fleeing figure of the Void Yuan Master from afar. She frowned and murmured, "Now, 9 out of the 10 famous swords in the world are in my hands. If I can get Zhang Lu, this sword will dance will be perfect." At that time, even a Yuan ancestor above a Yuan Master, "Who are you?" Yu Danxiang looked at her, his eyes full of reverence. "I'm the 37th generation of Zhizi from the state of Yu." Hidden sword. Yu Danxiang didn't care whose granddaughter this girl was. At this moment, he was only afraid that those horrible monsters would come again. At that time, if this girl didn't make a move, he would definitely die. "Well, will they come again?" Fishball Chong asked with a sad face. "The Yuan Master was injured by me, so he won't dare to come again in the short term." The swimsuit girl, Hidden Sword, said indifferently, "But the original Void Devils only have instincts. The original Void Devils are endless in this crevice. Even if you're very far away, they can still find you. As long as you continue to stay here, they will find you sooner or later. Then send me away." Or would this girl directly kill him for convenience? Yu Danxiang began to be alarmed again. Unexpectedly, Hidden Sword suddenly looked up and down at Yu Danxiang and said coldly, "Your true soul might have some background, otherwise the Void Yuan Master wouldn't have been attracted here. He can feel the threat and knows that this Eternal Night Palace can't be easily touched. But he still came. What do you want to do?" Yu Danxiang suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. "Use you as bait to kill the original Void Devils and replenish the Eternal Night Palace." Yu Danxiang opened his mouth, only to see that the bodies of the monsters that had fallen on the platform after being killed actually melted little by little and finally drilled into this huge green jade platform, as if they were being swallowed by this platform. F***CK. Yu Danxiang suddenly felt like he was an old piece of cured meat tied up by hunters in the desert to provoke their prey. "I want to go home." Where is the promised golden finger of adventure? Since he came to this country in South America to search for the origin of his bloodline, Boss Luo naturally wouldn't stay in the club the whole time. There were still 10 minutes until 7:30 in the evening. Luochio was already wearing a tuxedo and standing in the middle of the lobby. At this moment, Miss Maid, who was wearing an evening gown, slowly walked down the stairs with a smile on her face. Luochio also smiled at this time and said, "Speaking of which, this is the first time we're going to a concert." As he said this, the boss had an extra booklet in his hand. This was the promotional booklet for the concert, which introduced the origins of the performers and also the program list of the concert. The servant girl's hand gently held the boss' arm, and the two went out like this. It was naturally inconvenient to be in a tuxedo, but for Boss Luo, who had the address here, he could naturally move freely within the city. Of course, there was no need for invitations. Just like ordinary walking, the two, who were holding hands, were already walking in the corridor of the municipal theater. The orange-yellow light illuminated the surroundings, and the temperature of the air conditioner was just right. Otherwise, For a man wearing a tuxedo on such a hot day, he was afraid that he would be embarrassed before the concert started. The concert starts at 8 o'clock. He looked around and then whispered to the boss. Luaccio nodded, but his eyes turned to the side. In the dim light, Song Howard was looking at the time on his arm. Today he was still very handsome. The handsome smile reminded Luaccio of his father, the face that could only be seen in photos now. "Do you want to say hello?" The servant girl asked softly. If it wasn't obvious, who could see the existence of the two? But Luaccio shook his head. "My uncle should have something to do, so we can't disturb others during working hours. Let's maintain the most basic courtesy." With that, the boss led his female companion tonight into the concert hall. Song Howard covered his arm with his sleeve at this time, then frowned and looked at the entrance of the corridor in front of him with doubt, but found nothing. Then he heard the crisp sound of knocking on the floor. Song Howard was no stranger to this sound. It was the sound of high-heeled shoes walking. Luvia wore a fiery red spaghetti-strap dress. Her hair was coiled up, and her proud figure attracted a lot of attention as she walked. But she walked very slowly with her hand on the wall. Song Howard looked at her and greeted her with a smile. Luvia seemed to want to walk faster, but she suddenly lost her balance and threw herself at Song Howard. From a distance, she looked like a lady who was not used to wearing high-heeled shoes and couldn't keep her balance. But Luvia, who threw herself into Song Howard's arms, whispered, "Military counselor, Oni has successfully sneaked in. Next." Chapter 781. It wasn't evening yet, so the summer evening naturally came later than usual. It was a well-decorated coffee shop. Of course, the price was also enough to make the general public frown. According to Caroline's temperament, she usually wouldn't come to this kind of place to spend money. But she was waiting for someone, and the other party had specified this place. She had no choice but to order the cheapest black coffee here. Soon after, a middle-aged man walked into the coffee shop in a hurry, looking around as if he was looking for something. Caroline knew this was the person she was waiting for. The lawyer friend Nia asked her to contact. At 6:37 p.m., Caroline glanced at the time again. It was too late. She didn't know if she dared to get on the bus back. If it was too late, she would have to choose another route, which would require her to pass through several unfamiliar areas. Although she was also a local, there were obviously differences between the districts. "You're Caroline?" The middle-aged man quickly found Caroline's seat and sat down without hesitation. Caroline felt something called time on the other party. She noticed the man from the moment she entered the door. He looked at the time 3 times until he sat in front of her, twice on her watch and once on the wall clock in the room. Dressed in a suit and leather shoes, he was meticulous, his expression was serious, and his eyes were deep. Basically, the appearance of an elite was displayed in front of Caroline. The man's name was Carlo. Before Caroline could speak, Carlo went straight to the point. "Before we talk, Ms. Caroline, can you tell me what your relationship with Nia is? Family? Or her daughter?" Caroline didn't feel impolite when the other party asked this question. Instead, it made Caroline feel that this man probably didn't remember who Nia was talking about at all. The reason why he appeared was probably because of a business deal. Perhaps this man wasn't as glamorous as he looked. Perhaps the business of a law firm he ran wasn't good. He even urgently needed this commission to pay for the rent, utilities, and employee salaries of his law firm this month. That was why he made himself look professional. Caroline's perspective in this regard was not bad. After all, as a sex worker, as a prostitute, she had come into contact with too many types of men. She had seen rich men, and she had slept with rich men. As for peddlers and pawns, they were naturally not a problem for her. She could recognize people, but she didn't have enough confidence to deal with any type of person. She knew that she didn't have enough knowledge to face these men who always wore a mask. You would never know what they were thinking. Men were actually more fickle and difficult to grasp than women. "I'm Nia's friend." Carlo looked at him and gave such an answer. Or perhaps the other party had already guessed what kind of work he was doing from this answer. Caroline was too familiar with Carlo's gaze at this moment. However, the men who came to her for service basically all looked at her as if they were inspecting goods. Carlo nodded. "Ms. Caroline, according to what you said, Nia is looking for me to handle a property in the West End for her, right? It wasn't convenient to talk about it over the phone. I want to ask you about the commission fee this time. How much does Nia want? Do you have the authority to negotiate with me on her behalf? She only asked me to find you to help her. Caroline didn't know how to answer. Perhaps it would be better to nod at this moment, but she was obviously hesitant about some of the responsibilities she needed to bear after nodding. There's no need to carry any more burdens. Finding this Carlo is already within my power. Caroline thought so and immediately said, maybe you should go directly to the hospital to see her. She's in a bad condition now. Carlo wasn't impatient at all. Instead, he carefully asked about Nia's request. His attitude was very strict. Looking at the other party's nonchalant questioning, Caroline really couldn't handle it, but she couldn't help but have another thought in her mind. Maybe this man can really help Nia. Looking at Nia's appearance, the surgery should be very urgent. However, the resale of the property was not something that could be completed overnight. Moreover, the property in question was expensive, but it was also a serious problem to find a buyer immediately. How about this? Can you take me to see Nia? Carlo suddenly suggested at this time. I think it's better for me to talk to the person involved in this matter in person. I can write you an address. Caroline thought of the bus back and declined politely. She suddenly didn't want to go back and look at the lifeless Nia. She had thought about this problem before. If Nia's illness couldn't be cured, she was bound to meet Nia's last days. She just didn't know when she started to stop thinking about this problem and not think about what would happen if Nia suddenly died of illness. She didn't want to bear anything. She had fulfilled Nia's request. If this man could help, she would naturally help for the sake of the reward. If he couldn't help, then there was nothing she could do. Carlo could easily afford the cost of Nia's surgery, but she needed to use the huge bank card on hand. However, she didn't want to use this wealth at this time. She felt that out of all the people Nia knew, she was the only one who would visit her in the hospital and help her find a lawyer when she was in trouble. She had done everything she could. There was nothing more she could do. Thinking of this, Caroline suddenly felt at ease. Carlo didn't force it. After taking the address, he quickly left. What made Caroline angry was that although this guy left in a hurry and looked like he was eager to visit Nia, this guy didn't pay the bill. She randomly ordered dessert and a sandwich in the coffee shop, hurriedly finished it, and left the place, planning to take the bus back. Before getting on the bus, Caroline received a call from Livia, asking where she went. Caroline just said that she took on a business outside, and now that it was done, she was planning to go home. Livia told her that it was better not to come back for a few days, and that it would be better to hide outside for a few days. She was also planning to leave. The reason was, Boss Neymar died, and the gang was in chaos. The gang's second-in-command, Ronald, and the people who supported Neymar's eldest son began to fight for territory. In addition, because Joseph in the next area also died mysteriously, the boss of the next area also clamored to hand over the murderer, or else they would invade. During Caroline's absence today, many people had already died because of the fire. Caroline thought for a moment, picked up the phone, and called Carlo, who had just left. Mr. Carlo, I changed my mind. How about I go back with you to see Nia again? I'm a little worried about her. Who are you? This is a private room. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. On the upper floor of the Municipal Theater Recital Hall, there were individual rooms in the circular corridor. This was a VIP room for the truly rich or people with very high status to watch performances. Of course, on normal days, you could also get in with some money. But today's event was a friendly event with the consuls of neighboring countries, so it was naturally different. The person who shouted should be a bodyguard. He was very tall and had an iron-blooded aura. He might have been a soldier in the past. Or rather, he was a soldier now. Obviously, the identity of the people in this room was not simple. As for why the bodyguard chose to shout at the beginning instead of directly using force to expel them, on the one hand, he didn't want to make it public. On the other hand, it was naturally because he didn't know the origins of the two intruders. The woman was very beautiful, and the man next to her had an Asian face. Those who could enter this concert were either rich or noble. The origin of this young man and woman was probably not simple. Can I borrow this place? The beautiful woman in a black evening dress smiled slightly and clapped her hands gently. Because of the stockings, the clapping sound was not very loud at all. But the bodyguard heard the sound, and he heard it very clearly. His consciousness was instantly confused, and his eyelids were extremely heavy. After a few breaths, he closed his eyes directly and fell to the ground. At the same time, there were several different sounds in the room. They were all sounds made when people fell. This was obviously an extraordinary power. In fact, Luaccio intended to do it himself, but Miss Maid would always be one step faster than him. In fact, Luaccio quite enjoyed the feeling of sitting back and enjoying the fruits of others' labor, let alone other things. It was naturally pleasing to have such a beautiful maid to solve all the trivial matters for him. What was also pleasing to the eye was the orchestra that was entering the concert hall below. Regardless of whether they knew how to appreciate the sounds made by the following instruments or not, looking at this orderly entrance, they could always feel a trace of professionalism. Luaccio liked the orderly arrangement of the people below, which made him associate everything with tidiness. Being neat and tidy was naturally the most beautiful. Of course, the VIP box had no windows. It was just a single stand. There was a partition between the two stands. As for the front, naturally, one could see another stand across the circular corridor. However, wasn't there a little more bodyguard in this VIP box? Master, we seem to have encountered something interesting. Yi was tidying up the people who fell on the ground, binding let these guys fall on the ground casually. Naturally, it was not beautiful if they fell on the ground one by one. Boss Luo, who was used to encountering things when he went out, was obviously not surprised. He just looked at Yi curiously. Of course, even in such an open VIP box from the outside, nothing happened at all. It was not a fantasy. It was the easiest way to make people outside unable to see what happened here. What's the interesting thing? Yi pointed to the man who was obviously protected by several bodyguards, and then reached out to pick up a pen from the collar pocket of the middle-aged man. Boss Luo did not see anything special about this pen. If he had to say something, it was probably a very good-looking badge mark on the pen. Of course, it could only be seen after careful observation. Because of this badge, Miss Maid nodded and whispered, "This is the internal mark of the Lomansleiden Company. This company's headquarters is in the United States, and its main business is the production and launch of military satellites." Boss Luo had heard that this country was quite unlucky and had not been able to develop the satellite industry. It seemed that there was a big explosion because of the launch of rockets in the past, and a large group of aviation elites were directly destroyed. "Look at the invitation," Luaccio suddenly said. Yi quickly found an invitation and handed it to Luaccio. Boss Luo glanced at it, and then said indifferently, "It's in the name of a wine company's distributor. It seems that he is hiding his identity. Do you need to read his memory?" Yi suggested. If he could get ready-made information, he naturally did not need to buy it through the altar. This was naturally in line with Boss Luo's consistent principle of self-updating. So Boss Luo nodded without any pressure, and then stopped paying attention to this businessman's matter. Because soon, the content behind this matter would be completely presented to him through Miss Maid's oral narration. Speaking of which, if there's really a great deal, why do they all like to choose this kind of place? The lights began to dim. The performance officially began. Schubert, Ninth Symphony, Greatness. Compared to greatness, I prefer the Eighth Symphony, unfinished. I heard it a few years ago in Vienna, and I still remember it. Sitting in the ordinary seats in the hall, Songhauern spoke in Luvia's ear while holding Luvia's hand. In the eyes of others, they were like lovers. While feeling the warmth from Songhauern's hand, Luvia seemed to be in a very good mood. She curiously asked, "Why is it called unfinished?" Because he only wrote 2 chapters before stopping. Songhauern shrugged. Then, he looked at the orchestra in the concert hall with an infatuated gaze. "But it's precisely because it's unfinished and we don't know what's behind it. That's why it's so fascinating, like the lost arms of a beautiful goddess." Luvia was taken aback. She really did not understand how a woman without arms was beautiful. But since the military counselor said so, then so be it. Halfway through the concert, Song Howard glanced at the time on his watch. At this time, his phone vibrated. It was a message. Terminate the operation. This was a message from the Iris Flower headquarters. Song Howard furrowed his brows. Luvia keenly caught the change in his expression. Song Howard did not say anything. He just tilted the phone screen so that Luvia could see the content. This Song Howard, on the other hand, nodded indifferently. It seems that we can listen to the entire concert. Chapter 782. As one of the top 10 military enterprises in the world, Lomensliden was a well-deserved giant in the industry. Think about it. A company that undertook the military satellite launch and other services of the world's #1 hegemon. How powerful was its background? And the owner behind this company was probably someone who could be received politely by the leaders of ordinary countries. That world's hegemon was controlled by many plutocrats, and Lomensliden was naturally one of them. And the one who came to Rio this time was the moneyman behind Lomensliden, the talent of the Leiden family. As for this talent, he came with the Colombian Exchange Group. Interestingly, this talent of the Leiden family even got an identity as a member of the Exchange Group, a private satellite launch vehicle technology development agreement. After listening to Yuye's account, Boss Luo began to ponder. The following performance happened to be paused. In fact, it was also because the performance happened to be paused that Yuyi seized the time to report the information to her master. As the world's #1 hegemon, they actually plan to develop this technology with a country whose technology is far behind. Luochio shook his head. It's more appropriate to call it technology sales. Miss Maid smiled slightly. The person who privately discussed this matter with the Leiden family, this time, seems to be an important member of the opposition party in this country. Boss Luo nodded and suddenly raised his eyebrows. I heard that the current president of this country was impeached not long ago due to a corruption case, but he survived. Even so, he doesn't have much time left in office. Yi nodded. So, the opposition party wants to get this technology so that they can increase their bargaining chip before the next election. But the technology this time should be quite outdated. Even if it's outdated technology for a country that doesn't have it, it's still worth it, Luochio said indifferently. Technology, as long as they keep the lead, it's fine. After all, technological progress can't be suppressed. Instead of putting it on the shelf and eventually becoming a waste, it's better to suppress the remaining value. That's the right way for a capitalist. But after all, satellites are a reflection of national strength. Perhaps the Leiden family's action this time is also very secretive. Maybe it's a private matter. It's the mining and development of oil resources in this country. The Leiden family seems to be planning to enter this country's economic lifeline. After all, it is one of the BRICS countries. It is very rich in resources, and the geographical environment is very good. Miss Maid sneered. Boss Luo nodded. At this time, he casually waved his palm in front of him, and 3 oval light curtains appeared. A man's appearance was reflected on each of the light screens. They were among the guests sitting in the hall below. As for the 3 men, they would occasionally glance at the VIP room. Luochio blinked and instantly understood. He said softly, "Someone from the FBI? Looks like the Leiden family's actions weren't hidden after all." Boss Luo glanced at the unconscious man in the back seat and said with interest, "I wonder if Song Howard's mission has anything to do with this? It's not fun to know everything at once. Let's slowly observe the next development." But, Miss Maid looked at him curiously. Luochio smiled and said, "Don't you think fate is very interesting? My father was a policeman who was dedicated to the public and died in the line of duty. But his brother became the leader of a mercenary group abroad. He committed all kinds of crimes and killed people like flies. However, as the descendant of this bloodline, he also embarked on a different path. The sound of the orchestra sounded again. Symphony No. 9, great, too. Majestic, high-spirited. They called the leader of Iris Flower's Papa, which was Song Howard's father. Of course, Song Howard also called his father Papa, which meant the same as everyone else. During the intermission, Song Howard left his seat. The original planned time of action had long passed. Oni didn't take action. Naturally, he saw Luvia's gesture. In the bathroom, Song Howren, who had checked that there was no one here, quickly changed the chip in his phone to another one. "Hello, Papa, what's the matter?" At the other end of the phone, it was Papa, the leader of Iris Flowers. Song Tianyu said in a low voice, "I just got the information that there will be a situation at the theater. Someone buried a bomb in the theater." Song Howren was startled, and then his expression became dignified. "Who is it? How many bombs are there? What about our action this time?" Song Tianyu seemed to know that time was pressing, so he spoke a lot faster. "It's not our employer. The bomb this time seems to be the work of some remnants of the armed forces. This concert is for the exchange between Brazil and the neighboring countries. The consuls of several countries are also present." After listening, Song Howren rubbed his eyebrows. "Is it that group of lunatics who have no weapons and no men? But it's their style to not know about the bomb. So, I'm really at a disadvantage." The last part of the action bumped into the enemy's muzzle. According to the intelligence sources, the bomb installed this time is enough to blow up the entire theater. "Anyway, you need to evacuate immediately," Song Tianyu said quickly. "I will personally explain the situation to the employer. Moreover, if the target dies directly because of the explosion, maybe we can save a lot of effort." Song Howren suddenly said, "Papa, I'm afraid it's a little difficult for me to evacuate. The feast of this group of dangerous guys seems to have begun." Symphony No. 9. Great. The third chapter had already begun when Song Howren and Papa were talking on the phone. However, in the high-pitched sound of the orchestra, Song Howren suddenly heard a scream. In one of the rows of seats in the almost full concert hall, a handsome man kept apologizing and finally succeeded in sitting next to a woman in a red evening dress. Luvia. Looking at the man who occupied Song Howren's seat, Luvia frowned and said unhappily, "Oni, you should retreat and leave immediately. Why did you come back here?" The man, Oni, showed a playboy smile at this time. "I saw the military counselor leave. I'm afraid you'll be lonely. How is it? What do you think of my clothes? I just found it backstage. It should be the spare clothes of a performer. You can consider it a dog." Luvia answered impatiently. Oni was surprised and said, "The military counselor said dog is used to describe a gentleman. It seems it's really good." Luvia frowned. The meaning of this sentence could be understood as long as one knew a little about the culture of that country. Obviously, Oni did not care about the culture of his motherland mentioned by the military counselor in most cases. "Yes, he's really a dog gentleman." Luvia resisted the urge to laugh, but soon she became serious and lowered her voice again. "Papa has given the order to temporarily stop this operation." "Papa!" Oni blinked. Papa's orders were generally not simple. He was about to speak, but his shoulder was patted by the person in the back seat. Oni glanced at him subconsciously. The person in the back seat gave him a reproachful look and made a gesture to keep quiet. The concert hall needed to be quiet. Oni showed an apologetic look. When he was about to say something, he suddenly saw a surprised look in this guy's eyes. He kept looking at the stage in the concert hall. At this time, the most exciting moment of the third movement, the whole orchestra stopped at this critical moment. The concert hall quieted down instantly. All the audience now stared at the conductor of the orchestra. The conductor had fallen to the ground, motionless. A cellist in the orchestra hurried to the conductor's side, wanting to check the situation. However, when he helped the conductor up, he saw that the conductor's white shirt was dyed red. Someone, at the most exciting moment of the movement, shot the conductor to death. In front of the first row of seats, a luxuriously dressed woman screamed in panic. And the screams of panic spread like a plague in an instant. The horrible beginning was so scary, but the real horror was yet to come. The thunder-like sound was particularly clear in the concert hall, with excellent soundproofing conditions. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to inform you that you've been kidnapped." The sound echoed in the concert hall. It was the sound of the loudspeaker. There is a third party. In the VIP room, Boss Luo looked at the source of the sound from all directions, and finally fixed his eyes on a room directly above the stage. That was the place where the lighting and sound equipment were controlled. Song Howren's Assassination Party. Chapter 783. Fates intertwined here. Humans and humans, all living things. Evil. The root of chaos came from death, although death was not unfamiliar in this country. But the real death was still far away from the rich. They were well protected, and even the law served them. Convenience, comfort, privilege. They played with all the good things, but never thought that one day death would appear so close. The one with the red blood on his chest should be a famous conductor. In some ordinary countries, he might be a national treasure. Such a dazzling life was gone. The conductor's life ended on the stage, at the peak of the orchestral movement, and he really buried himself in the great symphony. But obviously, the audience was not willing to praise the famous conductor's deeds at this moment. They were more concerned about the situation at the scene. They were kidnapped. Then, what was the police chief named Greedy Wolf's fat pig, who had arrived early before the concert? What was he doing? This guy, who only knew how to swallow the country's property to the maximum limit, had reached the point where he could no longer be used and could give up. An old man, sitting in the VIP box at the top, was looking at the fat pig of the Greedy Wolf with a stern look. Director Jose felt that he was really wronged, because in order to ensure the safety of this place, he had begun to transfer manpower since the morning. Every guest who entered the theater had to go through several checks to confirm their identity before they could enter. As for the staff in the theater, each of them had been investigated. How did the thief get in? Not only did he come in, but he even brought a weapon in and killed the conductor in front of everyone in this kind of international exchange event. Although this kind of exchange event was always held in various names throughout the year, the key point was that even this kind of formal exchange event was essentially an exchange between countries. Director Jose had never thought of going further and getting closer to the center of the country's power. He felt that as long as he could sit in his current position, wait for the arrival of retirement, and then become a rich man in a Western country, it would be enough. However, after this incident, he was afraid that before being called Fat Pig of the Greedy Wolf, he would be labeled as incompetent. Mr. Speaker of the Senate, please believe me. I will ensure your safety and control the situation as soon as possible. Jose looked at the angry old man in horror. This old man had the power to make him step down with just one word. Let's hope so, Jose, the elder said in a low voice. After all, I don't want to lose a colleague. Jose wiped his sweat and nodded in a panic. Don't worry. In order to ensure the order of the venue, I have deployed the most elite men. By now, they must know the situation at the scene. I believe that they will be able to capture this group of lawless people very soon. The old man snorted coldly. Compared to such promises, he preferred to see tangible results. Perhaps Director Jose's prayer worked. The door of the VIP room was opened in the next moment. Several well-equipped men in police uniforms quickly walked in. Jose cursed in his heart. These guys were too awesome. He had just finished speaking, and they immediately appeared. Now, the old man should be able to appease some of his anger, right? The fat pig of the Greedy Wolf had already planned to reward these elites who rushed in front of him and the old man. Mr. Speaker of the Senate, look, these are the troops of the UPP. For the sake of safety, I deployed a small team this morning. Jose said proudly. The old man obviously knew that there was something wrong with the UPP, because a few years ago, in order to safely complete the World Games, the country made up its mind to eliminate the forces in the slums and complete the control of these criminal areas. And the troop that completed this great action was the UPP troop. Compared to Jose's pride, the old man just nodded calmly. He looked at Jose and said, Mr. Jose, I hope you can control the situation as soon as possible. I don't want to see any more loss of life. You know, many of the guests here are friends of our country. Sure. Jose nodded quickly, then moved his hundreds of pounds body to the front of these armed men. He said in a rough voice, How many of you have come in? Have you controlled the location of the bandits? Who is your leader? Let him come to see me as soon as possible. Okay, he will come to see you soon. The leader of the group revealed his pearly white teeth and looked at Jose with a smile. After all, it would take too much time for a fat pig like you to walk over. Well, he will come soon? Very good. Jose nodded with satisfaction, but his face suddenly froze. What did he just hear? This guy dared to call him a fat pig? But before Jose could get angry, he was kicked in the abdomen. This kick seemed to be about to burst his spleen. Jose fell to the ground and screamed, You dare to attack me? Are you rebelling? It seems that you haven't figured out the situation. The big man sneered, then pulled out a pistol and pointed at Jose. I really don't understand how an idiot like you can sit in your current position. You are the bandits who kidnapped me. Jose was shocked at this time. He didn't see that the UPP's men had been swapped. He finally understood how the bandits could get in so easily. Even if you made an airtight defense, you couldn't withstand the damage from the inside. From the beginning, the bandits had mixed in with his men. The pistol was pressed against Jose's forehead. This greedy fat pig raised his hands in horror and begged for mercy. Don't kill me. I'm just a nobody. Of course I know you're just a nobody who is being controlled. The man with the gun coldly snorted and said, However, I don't know if your fat can block my bullet and save your life. I really want to know. Save me. Jose subconsciously looked at the old senator with a pleading face. The old man looked at Jose as if he was looking at a dead man. He had been through a lot and sat on one of the thrones in the center of the country's power. At this time, he was still calm in the face of danger. The old senator said indifferently, Killing him is of no use to you. No matter what your origin is, I don't want to see more casualties tonight. Since you said this is a kidnapping, what are your conditions? Not many conditions, only two. All of a sudden, a quick voice came from behind the several big men in UPP uniforms. Then, the burly men stepped aside, and a man in the same uniform walked in. The roots on his face made him look very rough, but his soft and fine curly hair made him look especially delicate. This man was around 35 or 36 years old. This man exuded a dangerous aura. The senator frowned. He didn't like to deal with this kind of murderous guy, because this kind of people often didn't act according to common sense, and all the rules in the world couldn't regulate their way of action. Oh, are you their leader? The old senator was still calm, and his eyes quickly glanced at the concert hall below. Nobody knew when it started, but all the exits of the concert hall had been blocked. The fake police officers in UPP uniforms, holding sharp weapons, were facing the panicked crowd. On the stage, a group of orchestral players in reunions walked down the stage with their hands on their heads, under the threat of several gun-wielding murderers. The situation was unexpectedly serious. My name is Roger. The man smiled, and then took a few steps forward. This kind of VIP box naturally provided wine service. Roger seemed to be interested in the wine on the table, but the way he drank was as rough as the stubble on his face. Roger blew into the bottle, burped, touched his lips, and then said, 2 conditions. Let all UPP troops remove all slums in Rio and release some people from prison. The old senator did not respond, but quickly thought about Roger's intention. But Roger did not give him more time to think. 2 conditions. If you can't fulfill the first one, I'll kill 1 person every 10 minutes. If you can't fulfill the second one, I'll still kill 1 person every 10 minutes. What? At this moment, the old senator was obviously caught off guard. That was why he hated dealing with such lunatics the most. He could not help but frown. Your conditions, especially the first one, are not something I can agree to right away. You have to know that the withdrawal of UPP troops requires the consent of Congress. As for the second condition, who do you want to release? Roger took another sip of wine, walked to the front of the stands, and looked down at the sheep-like crowd below. These people are really happy. I really want to see their unfortunate faces. Well, let's see who is the unlucky one tonight. Roger turned his head to look at the senator with a grim smile. He did not even look down, just pulled out his pistol and casually fired a shot. The gunshot was like a clap of thunder in the concert hall, and the people below immediately screamed. However, when a head of parliament saw this, his face immediately turned pale. This guy was a complete lunatic. He actually fired a shot into the crowd below without even looking at them. It seems that these guys are very lucky. Roger took a look and said regretfully, It's a pity that I didn't hit anyone. But next time, I won't shoot so casually. Senator, can you agree to my conditions now? I can agree to your conditions and release the people you want to release. The old senator gritted his teeth. "This is my sincerity, but the first condition is not something that I can give an order to do alone. You have successfully threatened me, so there is no need for more cruelty. Please let us find a peaceful way." Roger shrugged. "I want to see these people in front of me within an hour." Roger named the names one by one. In the eyes of the old head of parliament, all of them were heinous people. The people who were asked to be released were the leaders of some gangs who had been captured by the UPP during the violent suppression a few years ago. At the same time, "I'll give you an hour to convince everyone in the Senate." Roger knocked the stand with the pistol handle. "In fact, I'm quite good at shooting if I don't shoot blindly." No matter what, at least he could buy an hour. The old senator hurriedly took out his phone. The evacuation of the UPP troops was not a joke. It was equivalent to returning the control to those lawless guys. It was equivalent to the government bowing down to those thugs. However, the hostages here were also, by the way, there have been a lot of murders during this time, and they were also your doing, right? The senator frowned and asked. He did not really want to get an answer, but just wanted to talk to the other side more. Maybe he could wait for more information. Information meant more bargaining power. Does the incompetent government intend to pin the crime on us because they can't catch the murderer? Roger sneered. "It doesn't matter. We don't care about such a crime. In addition, Mr. Senator, you still have 54 minutes. Anyway, taking hostages in such an international exchange event, and there were international friends among the hostages, was bound to cause problems in national diplomacy. This crime was serious enough, and a few lives were nothing in Roger's eyes. But who was the one who assassinated those guys behind? The gang leaders, the members of the Senate, these dead guys seem to have no connection." "I know." The old senator glanced at Roger with hatred. "But if they were not on Roger's side, then who was behind these murders?" Bang! Before the call was connected, the old senator was startled. He saw Roger blowing slowly at the muzzle of his gun, with a playful expression on his face. Of course, the gunshot just now was from Roger. This guy fired at the crowd again. "Mr. Roger, you said you would give me an hour." The old senator was indignant, glaring at him. "But I can't always wait for you for an hour, right?" Roger narrowed his eyes, pointing the muzzle downwards again, and kept moving as if he was looking for a target. Killing people for fun. Seeing this, the old senator did not dare to hesitate any longer. The moment the call was connected, he shouted, "I'm Treffman. Let the president answer the phone. Right now." Black as ink, without any possibility of mixing with any color. Boss Luo gazed at the direction of the VIP room on the upper floor, whispering to himself, "Although this color is theoretically possible, it's the first time I've seen pure evil. In terms of quality, it's surprisingly high. Everything that was kind and beautiful was naturally incomparably precious. However, where there was light, there was darkness, and the extreme violence was naturally very difficult to find." Chapter 784. He had known for a long time that the prisons in this country were overcrowded. If possible, the warden even hoped to clear out some of the prisoners here. Even if half of them were cleared out, the place would still be very crowded. Scum, trash, vermin. The warden, who was enjoying his dinner in his office, was not in a good mood. He was thinking that he should find a few prisoners to play with so that he could feel better. After all, in a boring place like this, only by having fun with the prisoners could he feel a trace of excitement. This was a place filled with stench, noise, and death. Suddenly, two strong beams of light shone in from the glass window beside him. The light was so bright that the warden was unable to open his eyes. At the same time, a call came from the center of power in the country. "Immediately pick up the following two prisoners. The escorts have arrived." The call was quickly hung up. The warden was able to clearly see the source of the strong beams of light. An armed helicopter. What happened? How could they dispatch such a thing to escort two prisoners? Even though the two prisoners mentioned in the phone call were notorious fellows, they were not the only ones who had a good reputation. Mama, Brimmy, Buggy, and Doflamingo. Even so, the warden immediately arranged for his subordinates to take the two fellows out of the tightly guarded cabin. It was not just this place. On this hot summer night, the same situation occurred in two other prisons. Rio Municipal Theater. Song Howren was looking at the screen of his mobile phone. Luvia was recording the situation on the scene through a video. All the guests were being supervised and squatted below the stage, making the place appear very crowded. This reminded Song Howren of the current situation in this country's famous prisons. Due to the fact that he had left the venue midway to send a message to his father, Song Howren was lucky enough to avoid this disaster. This made him appear less passive. At the very least, he had a lot of room to move around, away from the eyes of the bandits. There are bombs. Be careful. I will think of something. After sending a message to Luvia, Song Howren began to think about his next move. This place was extremely dangerous. The group of criminals had the strength to fight the police head-on, and there were high explosives that could blow up the entire theater. The key was the existence of explosives. There was no doubt that with his skills, he could safely leave this place. After all, he was not trapped in the concert hall. However, it was impossible for him to abandon his two subordinates and leave alone. Dozens of years ago, his father had crossed the ocean and come to this continent alone. He had struggled and worked hard to build the foundation he had today, relying on nothing but a pair of blood-stained hands and friendship. The meaning of love was priceless. He had always received this kind of education. He was taught that if he wanted his subordinates to be dead set on working for him, then they should also be willing to sacrifice their lives for him. All the entrances to the concert hall were guarded. Regardless of whether it was inside or outside the door, once there was any movement, multiple guns would be waiting for him. This is going to be difficult. Song Howren frowned. Through Luvia's video, he naturally saw the bullets that occasionally came from the stands of the VIP room. It didn't target anyone present. It seemed like it was just a casual shot. But it was precisely because of this action that Song Howren felt the cruelty of these bandits. They really didn't care about human lives. As for the outside of the theater, through the window, he could see that it had been surrounded by a large number of police cars and assault vehicles. The police's anti-riot team had already been on standby, tightly blocking the four sides of the theater. A little further away, the road had been completely blocked. The sound of horns sounded like the dissatisfaction of the city at night. It seems that they are negotiating. I just don't know what the conditions are. Song Howren quickly glanced and left silently. He planned to sneak to the back of the stage to see if he could blend in. It would be best to find the place where the bomb was installed. Taking a deep breath, Song Howren suddenly pressed his palm on his chest. His hand, through his clothes, seemed to be grabbing something. It was a small, round, ancient tablet in the shape of a sun. It was engraved with ancient words. It was something he got from an expedition, from a hidden temple in the Amazon jungle. Earlier, in the Spanish restaurant, he had told the story of the jungle adventure to his Chinese friend, whom he had only known for 1 or 2 hours. He also told the young man about the terrifying python, but he did not tell anyone that during that adventure, he had obtained such an ancient round plate. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call a badge. The badge of the sun god. Since he didn't know the origin of this thing, Song Howren had already named this thing. Holding only the badge of the sun god, Song Howren closed his eyes at this time. At this moment, his thoughts seemed to have left his body. A feeling of lightness seemed to have made his soul happy, but his body was like a heavy shackle, making him feel a sense of disgust and restraint at the same time. His detached mind was spreading at this time, like a ripple, gradually spreading to the edge of the theater. In his mind, this huge theater also began to be reconstructed. So he saw everything in the theater, including the guy hiding in the dark and the terrible thing that was buried enough to blow up this place. After a while, Song Howren opened his eyes again. His forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, and he felt a sense of fatigue coming from his body. This badge of the sun god allowed him to have this comprehensive perception ability, but at the same time, every use would greatly consume his physical strength and mental strength. Song Howren didn't dare to use it too much. There are 7 locations of the bomb. Song Howren recalled the location of the thing he saw. There are 23 bandits, and the leader is Roger. Ordinary people may have long forgotten about Roger, or they didn't know him at all. However, for Song Howren, who mingled in the gray side of this land, naturally knew. In the archives of Iris, there was a special information booklet listing the dangerous people of South American countries, and this Roger was one of them. The son of the former head of the Imperial Capital Command, and Imperial Capital Command could be said to be the most powerful gang in this country. A senator, guests from many countries, and many upper-class people. It's almost enough to use them as bargaining chips to negotiate with the country. Song Howren took off his suit jacket and folded up his sleeves at the same time. He stretched his neck and revealed a charming smile. He liked to explore, and this time, it was a very good adventure. Bucky, Doflamingo, Moria, and Crocodile. The old senator looked at the madman in front of him with a solemn expression. He had already remembered who Roger was, the son of the gang leader who once named himself Command in such an unscrupulous way. The people you want have been extracted from the place where they were imprisoned. The old senator said quickly, but you also know it takes time to send them from different places. There are less than 30 minutes left. They can't be sent here. I'll kill one if 1 minute is late. Roger didn't care. There are many people down there, aren't there? Even if they are late for 2 or 3 hours, it's more than enough. Madman, scumbag. The anger in the eyes of the old senator became more and more intense, but he couldn't resist. He even looked at a small item that was thrown on the table by Roger. To be exact, it was a remote control with only one red button. However, such a simple thing controlled the lives of all the hostages at the scene. High explosives enough to blow up the whole theater. Thinking of such a horrible thing buried under his feet, the old senator couldn't calm down. As for the greedy fat pig, he was even more unbearable, sweating profusely and trembling all over. However, listening to Roger's threatening words, the old senator had to dial the phone quickly again. Soon after, the old senator hurriedly said, Moria can arrive as soon as possible. After all, his prison is the closest to here. Roger, please don't completely enrage the government. You should know that we have shown our sincerity by extracting the hostages as soon as possible. Well, good. Roger nodded. I haven't seen Moria for a long time. Roger smiled, and the old senator sighed in relief. At least this guy wouldn't do anything too extreme, right? Bang. But I'm still bored. This shot directly hit the face of an orchestra member on the stage below, piercing through the left side of his face and through the right side of his face. After this shot, the old senator had no time to imagine what would happen next. He just looked at the devilish smile on the man's face in horror. Don't let me wait too long. Hurry up. No matter what method you use, I want to see these 4 guys appear at the gate of the theater in half an hour. There were a total of 23 bandits, and they were extremely vicious. No matter where these people were, they would be able to cause great destruction. But even so, it was not easy for 23 people to completely control the entire theater. After all, destruction was not the same as guarding. The hostages in the concert hall were still fine. However, those who had entered the VIP rooms might have slipped through the net, or some people might have taken advantage of the chaos to hide. Roger's 2 subordinates were currently searching for these fish that had escaped the net one by one. There might be many staff members outside the concert hall, but as long as all the hostages in the concert hall were under control, it would be enough. After all, no matter how excellent the theater staff was, they could not compare to an ordinary member of a foreign exchange group. Thanks to the structure of the theater, the thugs only needed to guard a few entrances and exits to suppress the scene. Then, they would assign people to search one by one. Hey, speaking of which, the recent murders attracted most of the police force and relaxed their supervision on us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to sneak into the UPP team so easily. Holding the P90 in front of his chest with both hands, one of the bandits seemed quite relaxed at this time. He walked in the corridor on the upper floor of the theater and opened a VIP room with his companion. Before this, they had already searched once, and now they were looking for loopholes to fill in the gaps. Roger was a complete madman, but at the same time, he was also a cautious guy. He would not complain about this kind of search no matter how many times he had to do it, before his goal was achieved. Gunshots occasionally sounded. The two knew that their leader was having fun, so they just smiled at each other and continued to search. At this time, on the ceiling of the corridor that the two had just passed, a figure quietly fell to the ground. It was Songhauern. He had successfully sneaked in here and heard the movements of the two bandits. So he went to the ceiling and waited for the two to pass by. People inevitably made a sound when they landed. No matter how soft it was still a sound. Hearing the movement, the two bandits instantly turned around and pointed their P90 at him. However, the figure in front of them was too fast. In just a moment, one of the bandits had already fallen. He did not even see how the other party attacked. The other bandit was knocked to the ground at the same time and did not even have time to shoot. The joints in his body were in extreme pain at this time, and his body was wrapped around by Songhauern like an octopus. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Songhauern was no stranger to killing. Many years ago, his father let him, who was only in his teens, go into the jungle alone to fight with ferocious beasts. Since the age of 16, he had followed his father to various war-torn places in chaotic South America. Under the appearance of a nobleman, there was a bloody pulse. Songhauern opened his hands at this time. Of the two bandits in front of him, one had his neck twisted and the other was knocked unconscious. Without any hesitation, Songhauern pulled out a black military knife from the unconscious bandit and directly cut his throat. 21 more. What Songhauern did not notice was that the moment these two bandits, especially the bandit whose throat was cut, died, the sun god's badge he wore lit up slightly. Just as Songhauern was about to deal with these two bodies, a strange sound alarmed him. In fact, activating the sun god's badge would make his perception soar crazily. But on normal days, his senses would also become more and more sensitive. It seemed that as the days passed, the improvement of his senses would continue. For example, his hearing at this moment was far better than that of ordinary people. The source of the sound came from another private room on the side. Songhauern's expression was indifferent as he slowly walked towards the box. He had already heard the movement. It was the sound of footsteps. There was indeed someone hiding in the room, and hearing the footsteps, he was sure that the person was very frightened at this time and kept retreating. Perhaps he was still looking around, trying to find a place to hide. In front of the door, Songhauern stopped, suddenly showed a smile, and calmly said, "Don't be nervous. I'm the person sent by the government to save you." As if, yin 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 PS1. Don't complain about the names of those prisoners and don't laugh. Because you said that foreigners' names are difficult to remember. So for the convenience of readers, especially when it comes to memory, I used local materials. It's definitely not because I'm too lazy to give names, dead face. Chapter 785. A while ago, Caroline finally contacted the lawyer, Carlo, and went to the hospital with him to visit Nia. Of course, they arrived by bus. Carlo's excuse was that because he was in a hurry to deliver a contract to a client last week, he parked the car in a non-parking area. Later, the car was towed away by the traffic police. Recently, he could only take the bus and sometimes even the motorcycle. Carlo kept talking about how unreasonable the traffic police's actions were in front of Caroline, and then how simple the country's justice system was. How should he say it? He spoke with assurance, but she didn't understand. Caroline only felt like she was looking at an auntie who was as petty as bargaining with a butcher in the market, only to lose in the end, like a defeated rooster. When they got on the bus, Carlo paid, but Caroline didn't think this guy was a gentleman at all. He should have paid the bill at the coffee shop. How much is this bus fare? Oh, poor Nia. Forgive me for not knowing about your situation until now. I should have come earlier. Carlo saw Nia lying on the hospital bed, walked to Nia's side almost without thinking. He knelt in front of the bed, held Nia's withered hands with both hands, and put them against his forehead. His voice was hoarse, and he cried sadly. "You used to be such a beautiful person. How did you become like this? God is so unfair. Oh, you should have let me know earlier. Why didn't you let me know?" Nia seemed to be moved by the man's deep affection. Perhaps she was also recalling the bits and pieces of the past with this man, and her deep eyes began to moisten. Caroline once thought that Nia's tears should have dried up after she was hospitalized. But in the end, she was still moved to tears by such a man's almost disgusting words. Could it be that Nia couldn't see at all that Carlo's performance was so hard-working? How could a man she hadn't seen for a few years, or even more than a decade, be like this? Or could it be that the illness had completely swallowed Nia's intelligence and rationality, making her more ignorant than any other ignorant woman? Caroline opened her mouth, and even her eyes revealed her disdain for Carlo. She hoped that Nia could see her actions, but Nia's eyes never left Carlo. Caroline didn't know if Nia wanted to remember this man's face forever at this time, but she didn't say anything in the end. She closed the door and sat alone in the chair outside the ward, leaving Carlo a chance to show off to Nia. God, for the sake of the commission fee, I hope this man can be gentle to the end. Why should I care? Caroline suddenly shook her head in self-mockery. She felt a little bored and looked around the corridor of the inpatient department. In the end, she found that there were actually quite a lot of people. They all had relatives who were hospitalized here, right? With her thoughts in a mess, Caroline simply took out her phone and began to scroll through her WeChat moments and Twitter to kill time. I wonder how Nia and Carlo's discussion in the ward went. She sent a message to Livia. After waiting for a while, Livia did not reply. She made another call, but it turned out that Livia's phone was turned off. Livia said that she would also leave and live outside for a while. She should have left by now, right? Although this guy was in the flesh business in the district, Caroline knew very well that Livia had a boyfriend outside without telling her, and it seemed that he was still a college student. Livia, this fool, even secretly left a portion of money every month to subsidize this man's tuition and living expenses. Perhaps she went to her boyfriend's side. Caroline fell asleep as she thought about it. She sat in a dream. In the dream, she was an angel. Her wings were not the pure white of angels in the Bible, but gray. Her wings were folded and wrapped around her body. She couldn't fly, so her body began to fall from the sky, but she could never touch the ground. She just kept falling, seemingly without end. She couldn't open her mouth and could only watch helplessly as she fell. Her body was like a stone statue, and she felt as if she was a soul that had been imprisoned in a statue. Caroline didn't know when another version of herself appeared in front of her. It was the same face, but the other party didn't have wings and was no different from an ordinary version of herself. She was also falling at the same speed as her. Her line of sight was always on the same moving horizontal line as her. She felt like she was looking into a mirror. The two of them were falling to the ground with their heads down, but they were still looking at each other with their eyes open. Caroline was still unable to speak. She had never been so anxious before. But the other party moved, the other version of herself moved. There was a slight smile on her face. It was a strange smile that frightened Caroline when she saw it. The other party moved. This person who looked exactly like her moved. While falling, the other party stretched out her palm and slowly reached out to her. Finally, she placed her palm below her abdomen. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her mouth kept changing, and it was obvious that she was saying something. I'm taking it. What? The ground below was suddenly swallowed up by darkness. The darkness was like ink dripping onto a piece of paper towel, quickly climbing up to the sky and finally dyeing the bright sky black. Caroline felt pain. It was very painful. The reason for the pain was that the mobile hospital bed being pushed by the doctors and nurses quickly passed through this narrow corridor. The wheels at the foot of the bed directly ran over Caroline's feet. It would be strange if it didn't hurt. Caroline woke up with a start in pain. She looked at the hospital bed in the distance with hatred and quickly took off her shoes. There was a red mark on her feet. She didn't know if her bones were hurt. Why am I so unlucky today? Caroline sighed and slowly rubbed her feet. At this moment, the door of the ward in front suddenly opened. Carlo walked out expressionlessly. He frowned when he saw Caroline still sitting here. Have you finished your discussion? Where's Nia? Caroline had to ask. Carlo said indifferently. She finally fell asleep. You better not wake her up. By the way, do you have time? I want to talk to you about something. Caroline instinctively felt that it might not be a good thing, but she endured the pain in her feet, put on her shoes, and followed the man to a relatively quiet place. It was the overhead floor of the hospital's inpatient department, a place for patience to breathe. Caroline limped, and Carlo had no intention of supporting her. This old man, who still had a trace of his handsome appearance when he was young, took out a wrinkled, soft pack of cigarettes from the pocket of his suit, picked one, and began to smoke. Caroline said impatiently, "If you have something to say, just say it. If there's nothing, I'm leaving. It's too late." She worked at night. Naturally, it was just an excuse to say that it was too late. She just didn't like to stay with this old man. It reminded her of Nia's appearance. It was completely different from when she was desperate. She glowed with a strange spirit, as if she saw hope. "You're also a prostitute." Carlo slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. "Nia told me some things about you." Caroline looked at him with her arms crossed and frowned. "If you have something to say, just say it." Carlo turned around and leaned against the railing with his back to the city's night lights. "Nia entrusted me to sell her house, and the remuneration has been negotiated. But she has another condition. I won't participate in the real estate business." Caroline shook her head. That kind of thing was too troublesome and thankless. She had no reason to help. Carlo said with a faint smile, "You really don't plan to participate? Even if you can get 10% of the wealth after the property is sold?" Caroline was startled. Carlo explained, "Nia did entrust me, but she also entrusted you to be her agent." With that said, Carlo sneered, "This woman obviously doesn't trust me." Thinking of Carlo's performance in the ward, Caroline also sneered, "It would be strange if I believed you. It's really disgusting. It's just for the sake of money." Carlo shrugged. "If she's willing to give me money, even if she wants me to kiss her feet right away. And you always insist on visiting Nia in the hospital. Don't you have some purpose?" Caroline nodded. She didn't want to talk too much with this man. Nia was willing to give her 10% after the property was sold. To be honest, it made her surprised. Was this the reward for visiting all this time? Perhaps, just like what this old man said, from the very beginning, she had expected something, because she knew Nia didn't have any children or relatives. But later, that kind of thought unconsciously became indifferent. As to when it disappeared, even Caroline herself couldn't tell. "Is that all? If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." Caroline directly turned around. Perhaps she should wait for Nia to wake up and talk to her about this matter. Nia was a light sleeper. The illness had been tormenting her, so Caroline felt she wouldn't wait for too long. 10% is too little. But if it's 50%, how about it? Carlo's voice came from behind, filled with an unprecedented charm. Caroline subconsciously looked back, only to see this old man biting the half-smoked cigarette, with both hands in his trouser pocket, looking at her with a smile that Caroline hated very much. This kind of smile was like the pimp who introduced her to the business, introduced her to her first customer, and completed the first business in her life. "What did you say?" Carlo walked towards Caroline. "I think Nia's condition is really terrible, don't you think? She can't be saved, and she won't be saved. Why should we waste our wealth on such an expensive surgery? And it's a surgery that might not be effective even if we do it. Tell me, instead of investing the money in the hospital, why not put it in my pocket and yours?" Caroline's breathing couldn't help but speed up with every sentence that Carlo said. Carlo suddenly reached out and lifted Caroline's chin. "With this money, your life and mine will become better, won't it? And what you and I need to do is just to weave a beautiful lie. You know, a house in the West District can be sold at a price you can't imagine. That's wealth that you can't earn even if you sleep with hundreds of men." "Scum!" Caroline slapped Carlo's face hard and left angrily. Carlo wasn't angry. Instead, he raised his voice and said behind Caroline, "Think about it carefully. As long as you nod, you can get a fortune. Nia can't live. Is it worth it or not? A house in the West District could indeed be sold at a sky-high price." Caroline didn't even know how Nia earned the money to buy such a house. "Surgery? Are we really not going back to Nia? The doctor did say that Nia's condition was very bad. The surgery was just a last resort, and the chance of success wasn't high. It was more likely to accelerate her death or die during the surgery. Why trust me?" It seemed that she also noticed Carlo's hypocrisy, so she was worried. After all, Nia was already a dying person. She was very suspicious and didn't believe anyone. It was understandable. Is not afraid that I will. How much could a house in the West District be sold for? No matter how much it could be sold, it wasn't a luxurious villa. It couldn't be compared to the wealth in her huge bank card. But this wealth couldn't be used recklessly before she figured out the situation. As she thought about it, Caroline had already arrived in front of Nia's ward. She reached out and put her hand on the door lock. Just as she was about to push it open, she paused. Her hand didn't seem to want to push the door open. She felt as if there was a pair of eyes watching her from behind. It was Carlo's eyes. Caroline turned around abruptly, but there was nothing behind her, only the grayish-white walls of the hospital corridor. A cry suddenly came from the right. A woman was lying on a moving bed, crying and unwilling to get down. The bedsheet covered the face of the person lying on the bed. Caroline knew what this meant. She remembered that this was the mobile hospital bed that had run over her not long ago. "I'm sorry, the surgery failed." The doctor seemed to only be able to say some useless words. She seemed to have heard these words many years ago when her father was shot in a gang fight. Caroline's face was pale, and she found it difficult to breathe. Her hand suddenly let go of the door lock. She held the wall of the corridor as if she was powerless. She just wanted to get away from this place. Whether it was Nia, the crying woman in front of her, or Carlo, who might still be smoking on the overhead floor. Get away. After a moment of silence in the VIP room, Song Howard heard footsteps again, coming towards the door. Click, the door opened. It was a white-haired old man who looked a little sloppy. He was about 60 years old. The old man was obviously terrified. Perhaps he had already seen Song Howard slit the criminal's throat, which was why he was so frightened. But it was clear that the person he killed was a criminal, which gave the old man the courage to show himself. Are you really the rescue? In addition to being frightened, the old man was also very suspicious. Song Howard said indifferently, "Let's not talk about this first. There's a bomb here. I will take you away as soon as possible." "Bomb?" the old man exclaimed. "It's enough to completely destroy this place. It's very dangerous." Song Howard nodded. "Let's not talk about this first. I will take you to the exit. You leave first. I have to find the bomb's remote control." Song Howard quickly glanced at the old man, but he was searching his memory. His memory had always been very good, especially after he got the Sun God badge. It seemed to be developing into a memory master. So he had long memorized the information of many important people in this country, their appearance, origin. As for this old man, he was also in his memory. Frankie, a doctor in the field of aerospace from the National Scientific Research Institute. He was also one of the only researchers who survived the rocket launch explosion in this country a long time ago. How could this old man be in such a good mood to come to this place for a concert? Chapter 786. "You're Dr. Frankie, right?" Song Howard looked at the old man and asked. Dr. Frankie also looked at Song Howard in bewilderment. It was not that he had never seen people with Eastern faces, but he felt very strange that an Eastern face would be a member of the government of this country. This was very rare. "You know me?" Dr. Frankie frowned. Song Howard said casually, "Doctor, I am from a national security agency. I have read all the information of important people in the country, so I can recognize you." His brain began to work quickly, and soon he came up with a complete explanation. It was not perfect, but it was enough for the current situation. "We have been monitoring the bandits for some time, and we have been paying close attention to their movements." Song Howard quickly said, "The leader of the bandits this time is the son of the former leader of the Imperial Capital Command. He is an extremely serious criminal. They have taken the entire theater hostage and want to negotiate with the country." Imperial Capital Command. Dr. Frankie exclaimed. Obviously, he knew the name of this gang. In fact, in this country, there was no one who didn't know the horror of the Imperial Capital Command. How could this be? How could this be? It shouldn't be. This time Dr. Frankie muttered to himself, and his puzzled expression became more and more intense. "Let's not talk about this first. Doctor, besides you, is there anyone else hiding?" Song Howard suddenly asked. Dr. Frankie subconsciously said, "I was separated from Mr. Billy in the chaos, but he was accompanied by bodyguards, so I don't know the situation now. Mr. Billy. Which Mr. Billy? Song Howard asked. Dr. Frankie said, Of course it's the Socialist Party. Can I really leave here safely? Dr. Frankie immediately changed his tone and looked at Song Howard nervously. Song Howard laughed in his heart. Although this old man is vigilant, his reaction is not fast. Socialist Party, Mr. Billy? Could it be the leader of the party? Song Howard quickly sorted out the information he had. Frankie was an important talent in the country's scientific research field, and that Mr. Billy was most likely the leader of one of the opposing parties, the Socialist Party. How could two such figures get together just to listen to a concert on a whim? Looking at the situation, this Mr. Billy probably didn't bring a lot of people. Otherwise, the leader of a party would naturally attract a lot of attention. It seemed to be a secret trip. Vaguely, Song Howard had a strange thought in his heart. Could it be that there was a third party in this theater who had gathered here for a certain matter, but unfortunately encountered Roger's hijacking of the theater? If this is the case, then including the assassination of the target on my side. TSK, this is really a good day. Doctor, I'll send you to a safe place first. Song Howard decisively grabbed the old man's arm. Dr. Frankie seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he held back. He just frowned and seemed to be worried about something. But when passing by a VIP room, Song Howard suddenly stopped, because he felt something was strange. In order to search for the remaining people hiding, Roger's men opened all the doors at the beginning. In this way, if the door of a room was closed during the second search, it was likely to be a fish that escaped the net. After all, when people were panicking, they would always subconsciously find a safe place. It was common sense to close the door of the hiding place. What Song Howard noticed was that this door was also closed and locked. This should be the room that the two bandits he killed before had passed by. Why didn't those two guys notice the abnormality here? Or after the two bandits passed by, someone walked into this room and closed the door? What's wrong? Dr. Frankie suddenly stopped and asked in confusion. There's someone inside. Song Howard made a silent gesture and then asked Dr. Frankie to hide behind him. He put his ear to the door as if he was listening to something. Is it Roger's men? Dr. Frankie's face turned pale. Song Howard shook his head and said intuitively, It doesn't seem like it. Doctor, you should stay away. Maybe it's a hidden guest. If so, I have the obligation to take them away together. Since Song Howard was a rescue worker, it was only natural that he had to save the victims. Regarding this, Dr. Frankie couldn't say anything. He could only nod in agreement and take a few steps back. However, this dispelled a lot of doubts about Song Howard's identity as a government official. Song Howard breathed slowly and put his hand on the door lock. This kind of door lock was just beautiful, but it couldn't withstand damage. He suddenly exerted force on his wrist and twisted it in an instant. The lock core was broken. Dr. Frankie let out an exclamation at this time. Obviously, he was very optimistic about Song Howard's ability. With the door lock broken, the door could naturally be opened easily. Song Howard was very careful. First, he hid by the door, gently pushed the door open, and quietly waited for the situation inside. After a few seconds, Song Howard didn't hear any movement. Only then did he lean into the room. However, he only found a few men sitting on the sofa. They lowered their heads and didn't move. They should be unconscious. At this moment, Song Howard's keen sense of touch made him feel that something was attacking him from behind. Did he hide behind the door the moment he opened it? It was just a small trick. He had already expected it. Song Howard suddenly turned around, and at the same time, his left leg flew out. He had learned a lot of fighting techniques. For example, this kind of spinning kick was a combination of Muay Thai and Taekwondo techniques at the same time. This kick was directly aimed at the enemy's head. If it hit, it could easily make an ordinary person faint. However, Song Howard stopped at the moment when he was about to hit the opponent. He saw the guy hiding behind the door, intending to sneak attack. At this time, he raised his arm and maintained the posture of punching. Moreover, he had a panicked expression. It seemed that he was frightened by Song Howard's ruthless move at this time. And behind this person, a beautiful woman in a black evening dress was also pale. Her hands were clenched tightly, and she was extremely nervous. Song Howard slowly put down his leg and said in surprise, "It's you?" The people hiding in a room and intending to sneak attack him were the young man and woman he had met on the street earlier. Luochio and Yu Yi. "Mr. Song, it's you." Luochio seemed to be very surprised. At the same time, he seemed to be relieved. He said with lingering fear, "I thought it was those annoying terrorists. Maybe I'm a terrorist." Song Howard blinked his eyes and looked at the countryman, who he felt quite familiar with. He smiled and said, "And the kind that kills without blinking." Luochio was startled, then said with a strange expression, "Then, in that case, the situation is even worse." "Ha ha, I'm just kidding." Song Howard didn't know why, but he always felt that the feeling of familiarity in his heart became stronger when he looked at the young man's embarrassed appearance. He patted the young man's shoulder directly. "I won't attack my friends. By the way, why are you hiding here?" Luochio looked at Yu Yi and quickly said, "I came here with her to listen to the concert. But we didn't expect to encounter a hijacking. It was very chaotic at that time, so we quietly hid." Song Howard suddenly asked, "You just hid in this room and then locked the door, right?" Luochio said in surprise, "How do you know?" Song Howard smiled and said, "Because I have eyes in the back of my head. Let's not talk about this first. What's the matter with these people? Why do they fall down?" He pointed to the unconscious men on the sofa. Song Howard's eyes were fierce. At first glance, he could see that among these people, only one was pampered, and the others were obviously bodyguards. But this time, Dr. Frankie was also there. He didn't call out Billy's name. Obviously, this guy couldn't be Frankie's companion. As for whether it was Luochio and Yu Yi who did it, Song Howard directly rejected this idea. From the way Luochio hid behind the door and attacked him, this was simply the behavior of an ordinary person. Even if he didn't stop and swept the other party's head with his leg, Luochio might have fallen to the ground. As for Yu Yi, this woman was weak and boneless. Not a single muscle could be seen on her body. She was completely like a noble daughter. Naturally, she didn't have that kind of ability. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to move around in this kind of evening dress. Even his subordinate Luvia couldn't do it. He asked Luochio if he came in and locked the door, and the other party's reaction was not beyond his expectations. At this time, the only thing Song Howard was curious about was the identity of Luochio and Yu Yi. The admission ticket for this concert was very difficult to get outside. This little guy said that he was going to study in the UK soon, right? Maybe he was from a rich family in the country, or the son of a government official. He should have some status or something. They came here to travel, so it wasn't strange that they came to listen to the concert. It's just that this pair of talented man and beautiful woman encountered such a dangerous situation. I'm afraid that the original idea of a romantic night has long been gone. By the way, it seems that Luochio mentioned that his father is a police officer. Then he should be an official in the police system, right? Luochio shook his head at this time. "I don't know. When I came in, they were already like this. I wanted to wake them up, but before I could do so, I heard some noises outside, so I hid. Then you appeared, Mr. Song." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Frankie interrupted at this time. Because Luochio and Song Howard were talking in Chinese, Dr. Frankie couldn't understand a word or two. His original wariness of Song Howard suddenly rose again. "Doctor, don't be nervous." Song Howard waved his hand and said, "These two people are from a rich family in China. They're my friends. We just happened to meet here." "Is that so?" Dr. Frankie didn't comment. Song Howard didn't care. Instead, he directly walked to the unconscious men and observed their situation. They didn't seem to be knocked out. And even if they were knocked out, who would be so bored as to put them neatly on the sofa? He took out a business card from one of the men and glanced at it. This person should be from the exchange group, the owner of the wine company, Huashi. When he heard this name, Dr. Frankie's expression clearly showed a trace of strangeness, but it was well captured by Song Howard. Song Howard didn't say anything, but frowned and said helplessly, "They fainted and can't be woken up for the time being. It's obviously unrealistic to take them away. Now we can only escape first, and I'll think of a way later." What if the criminals find them? Dr. Frankie blurted out at this time. Song Howard asked curiously, "Doctor, You seem to know these people? You seem to be nervous? Oh, it's a matter of life and death. Dr. Frankie quickly said. Song Howard shook his head and said, I can only choose you who can move normally. This is not a place to stay. If Roger finds out that his men didn't report in time, I'm afraid he will find out about the situation here. We need to leave now. Okay. Dr. Frankie nodded hesitantly. Song Howard looked at Luochio and Yi at this time, and patted Luochio's arm hard, and laughed heartily. How is it? Do you feel the charm of this country? Luochio smiled bitterly. I feel it. Have you practiced it in the future? Song Howard suddenly asked again. Luochio nodded and said casually, When I was young, my father taught me self-defense skills, but after I grew up, I didn't practice much. Song Howard nodded. There's no time to lose. Take your little girlfriend and follow me. This is the time to show your masculinity. With that, he suddenly approached Luochio's ear and whispered, It's also the last chance to win her heart. Let's leave here first? Luochio suggested. Why is it like this? I feel like I'm being possessed by Ren Xiling. Boss Luo secretly shook his head and looked at Miss Maid. Yui naturally cooperated and quickly stepped forward, letting the boss take her hand, and then followed behind Song Howard. Master seems to be having a good time. Miss Maid smiled slightly. A group of people, led by Song Howard, left quickly. Soon after, something happened. The group met another couple at the corner of the corridor and almost got into a fight. Jun Chong, Xiaoli, it's me. Song Howard suddenly shouted. Chong, Xiaoli? Oni and Luvia looked at each other. They didn't know what this military counselor was playing, but they had been following Song Howard for a long time, so they immediately cooperated. These two are my colleagues. Song Howard looked at the surprised doctor, Luochio, and Yi, and explained, We will take you away. Dr. Frankie didn't say anything, but his frown became deeper and deeper. Boss Luo looked at the woman named Xiaoli in surprise. This fiery red evening dress turned out to be the same style as the one he prepared for Yi. Oni, who transformed into Chong, was at the back, while Luvia, who transformed into Xiaoli, was leading the way with Song Howard. Song Howard asked in a low voice, How did you come up? Luvia quickly said, There's a lunatic upstairs who shoots at the crowd from time to time, causing panic. However, he just shot and killed a person, so the hostages suddenly became chaotic. Oni and I took advantage of the chaos and quietly escaped from the backstage. We came up here to see if there is a way out. Well, you did well. Now I don't have to waste my effort to get you out. Song Howard was quite surprised. By the way, military counselor, who are these three people? Luvia asked curiously. Song Howard said, That old man is a scientist. It seems that something happened tonight that we don't know. As for the others, they're just ordinary people, so I brought them along. That young man always gives me a warm feeling, so I can't let go of him. How willful. Don't you know it's very dangerous now? Luvia glared at Song Howard angrily. But perhaps this was the charm of the military counselor. Oni had been listening to the conversation between Song Howard and Luvia through the headset. After listening to it, he subconsciously turned to look at Luochio. After a few glances, he nodded his head. This frail-looking fellow with weak legs was probably one of those young masters from China. Additionally, he was the type who specialized in playing with women. Gigolo weakling. Oni whistled. However, just as he finished, he let out a scream, alarming everyone in front of him. Oni, Chong, what happened? Song Howard was greatly shocked. At this moment, Oni painfully raised his feet. After staring blankly for a while, he bitterly said, Boss, why is there a nail here? Chapter 787. The surrounding police officers completely cleared the main road, giving the helicopter a temporary landing place. An armed aircraft painted with the country's military logo landed quickly in the roar. When the hatch opened, a burly man in orange and yellow was the first to appear in everyone's eyes. The prisoner's hands were still handcuffed, and behind him, two soldiers surrounded him on both sides. Go down. Hurry up. The soldier shouted. The prisoner looked at the surrounding scenery, took a deep breath, and walked down under the soldier's urging. On the road ahead, there was already another man in prison clothes. He knew that the guy who came one step earlier was called Moria. Like him, Moria was a senior cadre of the former Imperial Capital Command. Later, he went solo and conquered a large territory. However, he was captured in the UPP crackdown a few years ago. Haha, crocodile, old man, we meet again. Moria belonged to the type who liked to laugh. His lips were darker than the average person, an unhealthy black-purple color, and he had 2 black eyes. You're not dead yet. Crocodile raised his eyebrows, apparently not seeing the excitement of his old friend. Moria didn't care much, just looked at Crocodile curiously. From the moment this guy appeared, he had a cigar in his mouth. After all, they were old friends for many years. Crocodile shrugged at this time and said, I asked them for it. If they don't give it to me, I won't come. If they use force, I bite my tongue. They have no choice but to meet my requirements. Moria subconsciously looked at the escort soldier behind Crocodile and saw the other party's expression at the moment. Do you know what happened? Moria asked at this time. Crocodile said casually, I heard something. Roger is inside. That guy won't die so easily. I used to know that this guy was crazy. Now it seems that he is simply a psychopath. But I like it. Who allowed you to talk? Behave yourself. A man who looked like a senior police officer frowned and yelled. Crocodile and Moria turned their heads at the same time to look at the guy who spoke, showing a kind look, and said in unison, Oh, are you talking to me? For some reason, the police officer was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. At this time, the sound of helicopters sounded again, and 2 more helicopters flew over from different directions at the same time. Actually, living in prison is pretty good. The food is good, entertainment is good, there are female prison guards to play with, and I don't have to worry about being assassinated by my enemies. Why do you want me out? A short man with a brandy nose grumbled as he was pushed down unwillingly. He was an extremely serious criminal, Bucky. On the other side, a tall man with dyed blonde hair and a strange smile on his face was also escorted down. Extreme felon. Doflamingo, the 4 of them had been escorted from different prisons and gathered in this place. It was unknown how many people had been used to capture these for criminals, but now they had no choice but to release these fellows. This caused many people who hated them to be enraged. Now the scene was completely under the command of the Minister of National Security. As for His Excellency the President, he sat in his office and watched the live broadcast with the country's giants because the Senate had sent back a very important message. A large number of high explosives had been installed in the theater. This kidnapping incident had already attracted the attention of those ferocious dog-like reporters. With the reform and development of the country, the media industry had been impacted by foreign countries. Now, almost half of the media industry in the country was under the control of foreign media. Therefore, not only was Rio in a mess, but even the neighboring countries, even North America across a continent, were paying attention to this matter at the same time. In the past hour, His Excellency the President had received greetings from several neighboring countries. This hijacking incident had become a diplomatic issue. I hope this matter can be resolved peacefully. His Excellency the President rubbed his forehead, then looked at the people in the office and calmed down. Everyone, let's continue the discussion on whether to remove the UPP troops. Minister of Finance, have you calculated how much we will lose if we withdraw? A thin middle-aged man stood up and said in a deep voice, Then, I will explain it to you right away. Bucky, Moria, Doflamingo, and Crocodile stood in a row at this time. Behind them were 4 submachine guns pointed at them. Obviously, once the 4 of them made any strange movements, they would face the wrath of bullets. The bandits inside, listen up. We have brought the prisoners to... A man used a loudspeaker and spoke loudly toward the theater. According to the instructions of his superior, he tried to negotiate with the bandits in the theater. I hope you won't be stubborn and cause more casualties, as long as you can come out and abandon your weapons and surrender. However, before he could finish his words, he heard a cry of alarm. A figure was thrown from the upper floor of the theater and smashed directly on the road in front of the theater door. The man was obviously a guest, but he was already dead. However, after being thrown from high altitude, his head smashed on the asphalt road, and his brain directly burst open. Unlock their handcuffs, then send them to the front of the door. Then, your people retreat 10 meters away. Don't move. Someone passed a request to the police outside through the sound equipment in the theater. My patience is limited. If you continue to dawdle, the next person to be thrown out will be your Senate president. Send them to the front of the theater. Quick. You must ensure the safety of the Senate president. At this time, the theater door only opened a small gap, just enough for one person pass through. Under the watchful eyes of many police officers, the 4 extremely serious criminals walked in one by one until the theater door closed again. At this time, in the temporary command center, a technician who was controlling various instruments installed in a modified car hidden in a nearby street immediately turned his head. Minister, Trojan's Trojan horse has been successfully deployed. The surveillance camera can be activated. From now on, we can understand the situation at the scene. Well, let the Trojan horse discover the ambush positions of all the bandits as much as possible. Let the next team be on standby at any time. When the location of the following bandits is grasped, the decapitation operation will begin. Yes. The technician turned to the microphone and said after pressing the button, "Storm team, continue to stand by." After Bucky and the others walked through the theater door, they were greeted by a dim light. The theater hall at the entrance was not lit at this time. These people were extremely vicious people, so the darkness naturally did not scare them. "Roger, we are in. Where are you?" Bucky frowned at this time and looked around, but it was too dark for him to see the surrounding situation at all. Bang! Suddenly, a gunshot sounded. Bucky was startled and dodged back, bumping into Moria. At the same time, the lights in the theater hall were turned on in an instant. At the stairs, Roger was holding a P90 in his hand, pointing at the 4 people. Obviously, the shot just now was fired from this P90. Roger, Crocodile frowned. Everyone was also surprised and looked at Roger together. This man was expressionless, and no one knew whether he would shoot a second time next. But the next second, Roger suddenly put down the gun, then opened his hands and laughed. Wow, wow, wow. My friends, long time no see. Did you miss me? Yes, it's really been a long time. Bucky shook his head. As soon as he appeared, he greeted them like this. It was really the madman's character. Just now, he really intended to shoot one of them, right? When you were in prison, I heard that you fled to Russia. When did you come back? Moria stepped forward. At the same time, he found that there were at least 4 guys hiding in different places. I came back half a year ago. Roger hugged Moria, then looked at the other 3 and said, "Come on, let's go inside. If those stupid Rio policemen rush in here, I won't be able to stop them." Bucky, what are you looking at? Come here. The vases hanging here are worthless things. Don't look at them anymore. Bucky shrugged and walked up. At this time, 2 gangsters came out of the dark and went directly to the gate of the theater. It seemed that they were guarding the first line of defense. After looking around a few times, Doflamingo smiled and said, "This place is good for defense. How many people do you have this time? How many weapons do you have? How long can the ammunition last? Hey, guys, I know you've been trapped for several years, and you've been bored for a long time. Don't worry, I will let you make a big fuss." Roger laughed and led the 4 people into the concert hall. "I want to go to the toilet. F***. I haven't heard anything along the way. I'm suffocating," Bucky said unhappily. "Before I went out, the female prison guard with a big but was sucking it for me. I only did half of it." Roger smiled and did not say anything. He just waved his hand and said, "Batu, take him there." The remaining 3 people, led by Roger, walked into a VIP room. Here, they naturally saw Rio's greedy fat pig and the Senate president. Both of them were celebrities and could be seen at any time on TV. Crocodile and the other 2 naturally recognized them. Moria seemed to be quite interested in the greedy fat pig. He went directly to Director Jose with a grin on his face. Director Jose was so scared that he almost fainted. Crocodile walked to the front of the stand and looked down at the concert hall. He smiled and said, "It's really a big deal. There are so many people in this room, and there is our Senate president, who is the most important." Roger sneered. When the old Senate president heard this, he was angry but did not dare to say anything. Roger was already a homicidal maniac, and now there were four more extremely serious criminals. This group of lawless guys gathered together. It was unknown how much damage they would cause to the city. At this time, Doflamingo was sitting on the sofa leisurely, crossing his legs and looking at Roger. "Roger, did you make such a big scene just to get us out?" Doflamingo then said, "You should understand that it is not difficult for us to get out. We just don't want to come out for the time being. Brother Ming, our era is about to start again." Roger's eyes were full of fanaticism. "I want Rio to return to the state of 20 years ago and let everything return to the way it was before." Doflamingo sneered. "With these hostages in your hands and your 20 or so men. Roger, it's not that I want to hurt you, but it is very likely that in the end, the four of us will just come out for a breather, and you and your men will go back with us. Do you know what is waiting for you outside? Helicopters, assault vehicles, riot squads, and even soldiers. There is no way for us to leave safely from so many encirclements." Roger said indifferently, "Brother Ming, are you going to give up? It doesn't matter. I can let you out. So can Crocodile and Moria. As long as you ask, I can send you off personally." "Huh. Roger, Brother Ming doesn't care about you." Moria sat up directly and used Director Jose as a chair. "And you have to understand that we have already left the headquarters. We are no longer under you and the old man. If the benefits are not enough, we will not work for you." Roger suddenly laughed. "Let me ask you, how many slums are there in Rio?" Moria said without thinking, 600 or 700, but now, because of the suppression of the UPP, our strength is less than half of what it used to be. "Wait, are you going to let the UPP troops withdraw?" "This is just the first step." Roger smiled at this time, then took out a document from his clothes and said, "In addition, I found this thing in Russia in the past few years." The thing Roger took out attracted the attention of several people. When Crocodile picked it up and opened it out of curiosity, his face suddenly changed slightly. "What is it?" Doflamingo frowned. Crocodile said solemnly, "Nuclear bomb. Let me tell you, back in the day I shot from the South Bridge to the North Bridge with one shot. That scene was called a river of blood. Do you know what people call me?" Bucky, who had a red brandy nose, looked triumphantly at Batu, who accompanied him to the toilet. "What's your name?" Batu was not joking, but he was quite respectful to the former senior cadre of the Imperial headquarters. After all, each of these four people could be said to be a legendary figure in the underworld. "Legendary bad guy." Bucky suddenly sneered, and as fast as lightning, he grabbed an alloy dagger from Batu's combat uniform. The dagger in Bucky's hand was like a living thing, spinning quickly and finally sticking to Batu's neck in the blink of an eye. "You." Batu could not figure out Bucky's intention at this time, but he was sweating. "It's just a joke." Bucky shrugged at this time, then picked up the tip of the dagger and said, "This knife is good. I want it." Batu shook his head. Boss Roger was going to equip these four guys with weapons. A dagger was not enough. Fortunately, he took out the pistol from the combat uniform. Sometimes, throwing knives are more useful than bullets. Bucky shook his head. "No one will not be afraid after seeing my throwing knives. My enemies, I will usually... What will they do?" Buggy didn't go on because he saw people. He saw several people, men and women. The men were handsome, the women were beautiful, and there was even an old man. Good Lord, it was obvious that he was a Battle 5 trash at first glance. It was time to let people know how powerful he was. It was really fun to bully the weak. Chapter 788. Municipal Theater, Side Street, Modified Vehicular Command Center. Minister, the Trojan horse has successfully entered the concert hall. The number of criminals, their identities, and their hiding location are being confirmed. The technician quickly reported. The minister naturally couldn't stay idle. Now it could be said that it was a race against time. Once the criminals were completely enraged and went crazy, it would lead to a monstrous disaster. Not to mention that the people inside were either rich or noble. Even ordinary people would bring great turmoil to the government, just like the terrorist attack that happened in the United States more than a decade ago. But in order to guide domestic public opinion, they could launch a war against other countries. However, they had no other way. Because Roger was originally a very serious criminal in this country. He had always been on the wanted list. However, if a government directly compromised with these criminals, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for this government. Then, his credibility, which was not very good to begin with, would be completely gone. I hope this Trojan horse can help us solve this crisis. The Minister of Security rubbed his forehead with a headache. Among the 4 prisoners sent in, one had been persuaded by them to mix in as a spy and cooperate with the police rescue operation. But would that guy really be so obedient and choose to cooperate with the government? I hope so. The minister sighed, his gaze once again cast on the screen in front of the podium, looking at the situation in the concert hall bit by bit. In fact, Buggy thought that there was really no problem with his judgment. You see, although he and Batu were only 2 people, the other side had a total of 6 men and women. It seemed that the other side had the advantage. However, Batu was fully armed, and he still had a dagger in his hand, didn't he? What about the other side? 2 women in evening gowns, an old man, and the other 3 men were even more unarmed. This was simply like 2 kings meeting a rookie who didn't even know how to operate when fighting in the jungle. So Buggy thought that there was really no problem with his judgment. But why was it like this? Why was Batu's weapon already in the hands of someone else? Why was he pressed to the ground by this woman in a red evening gown? I am a legendary bad guy. Bucky Barton Barkus, I recognize you. At this moment, Song Howard sized up the other party with great interest. A senior cadre of the former Imperial Capital Command. Rumor has it that he doesn't have much ability, but his luck is the max. He was one of the chief's lucky stars back then. He's often muddle-headed and can complete missions without knowing why. He's the type who wins by lying down. But there are also people who say that you're an unfathomable man. Is that true? Buggy opened his mouth and suddenly glanced at Batu. At this time, he found that Batu had already been knocked to the ground, apparently unconscious. You? Who are you? At this time, Luvia had let go of Bucky, but she took a pistol from Oni's hand and held it against his back. Bucky had no choice but to raise his hands to show that he did not intend to resist. Under such circumstances, of course we are enemies. Song Howard smiled. Also, I'm more curious. You should be in prison, right? When did you break out of prison? Song Howard felt strange. Not long ago, when he used the Sun God's badge, he did not sense Bucky's appearance in his perception. Or, during this period of time, what new changes have occurred? It seems that there are still drawbacks for not being able to activate the perception ability of the Sun God's badge all the time. I didn't break out of prison, Bucky swallowed. He found that he seemed to often encounter people pointing guns at his back in his life. So he was very clear that in this case, if he wanted to protect his life, what he needed to do was naturally to cooperate with the other party as much as possible. But why can these guys put me and Batu down with bare hands? This is not scientific. Oh, so this is one of Roger's requests to the government? Song Howard nodded and keenly caught a trace of Roger's thoughts. Who else is there besides you? Bucky had to report his name directly. At the same time, he secretly thought that this guy had a keen intuition. Is this guy cheating? Song Howard was silent. As a mercenary group active in the dark world of South America, Iris Flower had done a lot of business. Starting from his father, the leader of Iris Flower, it had been a long journey. Over the past few days, Iris Flower had cooperated with the Imperial Capital Command headquarters before. The few fellows that Roger had gotten out of prison this time were all rich and powerful. Although they were arrested and imprisoned, they still secretly controlled a lot of assets. Although the UPP suppressed a lot of slums, it did not mean that the traditional forces of this country disappeared so easily. They were just dormant, waiting for the day of their return. Song Howard suddenly said at this time, "It's a disaster to let you out. This is undoubtedly a miscalculation for our government. Well, in order to block the public's mouth, please die here. After that, you can use the words accidentally killed in a fight with the gangsters." Bucky suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He had killed a lot of people, so he knew very well what kind of eyes looked like when killing people. This was obviously the eyes of the other party now. So, why did you let me out? Isn't it good to stay in prison? The food is good, the entertainment is good, there are female prison guards to play with, and I can play Texas poker with the warden when I'm free. I don't have to worry about the assassination of my enemies. Except that I can't leave prison. It's no different from a vacation. Wait. What did he just say? Our government? Is this guy a member of the government? Wait, don't do it first. Bucky hurriedly said, Don't do it first. I came in with a special mission this time. I am. You are. Song Howard narrowed his eyes and then chuckled. You want to say that you have an agreement with the government. You sneaked in here, grasped the situation here, and cooperated with the outside? How did you know? Bucky was stunned. He looked at Song Howard in amazement. How did this guy guess my thoughts? Song Howard's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and he suddenly said, Chong, you keep an eye on this guy. Don't let him move. Oni nodded and walked over with a slightly unnatural posture. Then he clasped Bucky's hands. Song Howard was checking the equipment that he had stripped from Ba Tuesday. He took out the other party's walkie-talkie. It was unknown what he was thinking. Luvia quietly came to Song Howard's side and asked in a low voice, Do you really believe his words? Do you want to check it? If he had really assisted the government, then Bucky would have at least hidden a surveillance device on him. If they could not find it, then the lie would be exposed. Don't you think it's interesting? Song Howard narrowed his eyes. Luvia was stunned and said, Interesting? Song Howard said indifferently, Roger's real intention. Luvia frowned and said, But there are a lot of explosives hidden here. After all, it's too dangerous. I promised Dad that I would protect you. Song Howard said, Do you think Roger really dares to press the detonator? Although he is a madman, he is certainly not crazy enough to risk his life to perish together with the enemy. If he still has something in his heart that he wants to accomplish, then he will cherish his life more. So, before he safely leaves the theater, we are the safest. With that, he glanced at Luaccio and the others who were left aside and whispered in Luvia's ear, Now, there are all people from the government outside. They had already surrounded the outside of the city so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. Although we can leave now, once we walk out of the theater, we are bound to be discovered by the police. The three of them should be fine, but the three of us. Luvia nodded solemnly. Their identities were all fake and could not be verified by the police. Moreover, a large number of hostages in the concert hall were still being held, while they walked out safely. If the group of police in Rio were not full of fat, they would definitely investigate carefully. We can only wait for the police to rescue us, and then we can blend in with the hostages and leave, Luvia said helplessly. If they left before the arrival of the police deployment, they did not have to care about this. But now it was obvious that they had missed the best opportunity. Luvia glanced at Song Howard. Originally, the military counselor who happened to be outside and communicating with Dad before the accident could have left directly, but he stayed. Luvia subconsciously held Song Howard's hand. The three people you have with you are a burden. Do you think we should? After all, they have seen what we look like. Song Howard shook his head. They don't know our identity. They just think that we are people sent by the government to rescue them. Although it is not easy for us to leave, if they go out, there should be no problem. Let's find an opportunity to send them out halfway. Military counselor. Luvia seemed to want to say something. Song Howard said, Dad taught us that one more friend is one less enemy. Whether it's Frankie or Luaccio, their identities are not simple. Maybe they can be useful in the future. Life is a huge river. There are fish in it, and we're the fish in it. We will meet again. Luvia did not say anything more. At this time, they moved the unconscious Batu and Buggy to a pantry in the corridor. There was a lot of food here. It was originally for the guests in the VIP room, but now it was good for everyone to replenish their physical strength. It was easy for people to lose their physical strength and consume their body heat in fear and tension. Song Howard suggested that everyone take a 10-minute break here for the time being. Dr. Frankie took out his mobile phone at this time and waved it around, but he could not receive a signal. Song Howard said, It is useless. The criminals should have released a special interference wave. Otherwise, with so many people in the concert hall holding mobile phones, it is impossible for the police not to know the situation here. It should be said that without the permission of the channel, there is no way to contact the outside world. Dr. Frankie shook his head, grabbed a bottle of champagne here, walked to the corner, and squatted down, drinking alone, or maybe to boost his courage. Are you okay? Song Howren, Luochio, and Yu Yi sat quietly in the corner, walked to Luochio, and asked casually. Not bad. Boss Luo responded simply. He should be the kind of person who should be traveling with his family. It seemed that he should not be too calm. So Boss Luo then asked with concern, Mr. Song, can we get out safely? Song Howren smiled and said, We will go to the second floor later. The bathroom, there has a window. I checked before. Next to the window is a sewer. It should be no problem to climb down. The police are outside. As long as you don't alarm the criminals halfway, you should be safe if there is a gunfight. That's good. Luochio nodded. Song Howren tore open a packet of biscuits and sent it to Luochio, blinked and said, Don't let your lovely companion starve. This is not the behavior of a gentleman. Luochio smiled slightly. Song Howren seemed to be born to give people a good sense of security. He was humorous and elegant, confident and orderly, as if he was a person who was confident that he could do everything. There was a God in his heart, and he was confident that he was that God, so he was strong. Have you ever played with a pistol? Song Howren took a pistol and quickly pulled the safety off in front of Luochio, and asked at the same time, I played at the shooting club. Luochio thought and said truthfully, but they are all domestic goods. In fact, they're all about the same. Song Howren put the pistol in front of Luochio, and there were 2 clips of bullets. A real gun is slightly heavier, so when pointing at the enemy, it is best to raise your wrist slightly, so it is not easy to shoot down when shooting. He grabbed Luochio's wrist and let Luochio hold the pistol, and then he pointed the gun at himself and adjusted his posture slightly. Yes, like this. Oh, very good. Your hand is not too shaky. You have some potential. Luochio suddenly asked, Can you let me hold it? If we meet the enemy and we fight, I may not be able to protect you. Song Howren waved his hand and said, The one who can protect yourself the most is yourself. Don't feel burdened. These are all murderers whose hands are stained with blood. If you kill one, the king of hell may record your merit in a merit book. Boss Luo relaxed a bit, smiled, and said, I always feel that you are cursing me to die later. Song Howren laughed and said, It was a slip of the tongue. I was talking about later. My old man believes in this kind of thing. He has heard a lot since he was young. Don't be offended. Your father is? Luochio slightly raised his head. Song Howren did not seem to want to say more, and just said casually, He is a hospitable person, especially us Chinese. But he has not been out for a long time and has been recuperating at home recently. Boss Luo did not continue to ask, so that it would be natural. At this moment, a man's voice suddenly sounded in the pantry, startling Dr. Frankie. It turned out that the communicator that Ba Tu carried with him was ringing. He led Ba Tu to the toilet and did not return for a long time, which obviously aroused the suspicion of the criminals. Ba Tu, can you hear me? Reply. We found a fish that we missed on the 4th floor corridor, and it is a big fish. Leader Billy, where are you? Immediately launch a pincer attack. Reply. The walkie-talkie kept ringing. Chapter 789. If there was no response, it would immediately arouse the other party's suspicion. Everyone looked at the walkie-talkie placed on the bar counter in silence, as if they were afraid that even a little sound would attract the other party's attention. Song Howren's eyes narrowed slightly, and suddenly reached out and grabbed Buggy's shoulder. I say one sentence. You say one sentence. Do you understand? I will cooperate. Buggy nodded. Only never let the muzzle leave his back from beginning to end. Buggy sighed and tried to make his voice calm down. He quickly picked up the walkie-talkie and said loudly, Roger, I'll be right there. You're not Ba Tu? Who are you? The person on the walkie-talkie suddenly said angrily at this time. However, another voice sounded at this time. Roger's voice. Buggy? Why is it you? Where's Ba Tu? Buggy glanced at Song Howren at this time, only to see him quickly whisper a few words in his ear, and then repeated, Hey, Roger, your people fell into the cesspool and can't get out. What did you eat before the operation? And your shit is so smelly. Roger on the other side of the walkie-talkie was silent for a while, and then said, "Where are you now?" "The bar counter on the left side of the corridor on the third floor. I'm hungry, looking for something to eat." "Oh, your people are coming out. I'll let them talk to you." At this time, Oni's footsteps were heard. "No need. Buggy, you and Batu go up the stairs on the left, shoot Big Fish down, and then come and meet me." "Over." "Roger, Roger, I'll be right there." Buggy turned off the walkie-talkie, then looked at Song Howard with a lingering fear, and said with a wry smile, "Are you satisfied now?" Oni behind him looked at him suspiciously. "Are you really a mole in the police?" Buggy seized the opportunity and said, "If I'm not, why should I help you? Can't I just inform Roger directly?" Oni sneered, "Because you're afraid of death. Don't talk too much." Bucky glared at Oni and said innocently, "Believe it or not, I really don't want to participate in any of Roger's actions." This time, he was the one who proposed the terms, forcing the government to release all of us. "In fact, compared to the outside world, I prefer to stay in prison. Inside, the warden and I are both emperors." "Really? But this is only your side of the story, right?" Oni sneered. He didn't believe Buggy's words at all, but at the same time, he couldn't understand why the military advisor would bring this guy along. Unexpectedly, Dr. Frankie suddenly said, "We have to rescue Mr. Billy. We can't let him fall into the hands of the bandits." Song Howard said indifferently, "Doctor, we can't even take care of ourselves now. I'm afraid we don't have the energy to save people. I'll send you out first. Shally, take the doctor with you. While the bandits are distracted, we can leave this place." "You can't do this. You have to save him. You have to save Mr. Billy." But the old doctor, who was shouting, couldn't get rid of Luvia's hands. He could only try to persuade everyone while being pulled to move. Before leaving, Boss Luo took away the ballpoint pen and sticky notes placed on the bar counter. Although Song Howard found Luacio's action strange, he didn't ask much. Everyone then left the bar, except for Oni. But he soon caught up with everyone and quietly made a gesture to Song Howard. But Buggy thought of the unconscious Batu, who was not brought out. He thought that Batu might have been quietly killed, although it was understandable if the bandits were killed in a fight. But in this case, it didn't seem to be the police's style to kill someone when they had already caught him alive. Are these guys really from the government? Bang, 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 bang. A few gunshots suddenly rang out. They didn't know whether these were bullets fired by Roger for fun, or by the bandits chasing after Mr. Billy, or by Billy's resistance. However, the place to evacuate that Song Howard mentioned was already in front of them. Song Howard opened the window of the bathroom and quickly glanced down. There were at least 7 police cars parked on the street. The police put up riot shields and stood in a human wall, completely encircling the area below. "You'll be safe if you go down from here." Song Howard turned around and smiled, "but it may be difficult for a lady to climb down. It's a pity that such a beautiful dress is wasted." Yi looked at the sewer next to her with some difficulty. "Do I really have to climb down in such an indecent way?" But since her master chose to use this method to contact Song Howard, she could only continue to act like a normal person. Although it was a little painful, in order to better suit the current situation, Miss Maid could only directly tear the hem of her dress to make it easier for her to move. For a moment, a touch of white seemed to appear, but it disappeared in an instant. It turned out that Luaccio had taken off his coat and wrapped Yuye's waist. "I'll give you another one when we go back," the boss whispered to Miss Maid. The owner whispered in the servant girl's ear. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at Luvia, who was guarding the door, and added, "The one and only. Abiding by the principle of ladies first." Luaccio helped Yuyi climb up the windowsill and then groped for the sewer outside the wall. Because it was only on the second floor, it was easy for them to slide to the ground. After that, it was Dr. French's turn. He didn't yell, because before this, Song Howard promised that the 3 of them wouldn't leave just like that. They would stay here because their mission was not completed yet. Dr. Frankie could only repeatedly urge Song Howard to save Mr. Billy as well. "It's your turn." Song Howard finally looked at Luaccio. Boss Luo suddenly said, "Will we have a chance to meet again?" Song Howard was stunned, then smiled and said, "Didn't we meet twice in the past few days?" Luo Chio also smiled, and then quickly took out a piece of paper and a pen. He quickly wrote an address on the paper and handed it to Song Howren. This is where I'm currently living. If it's safe, I hope you can come to me. After all, you saved me. If possible, please let me thank you properly, even if it's just a dinner. As a result, the address written by Luochio, Song Howren glanced at it and said in surprise, "You seem to have prepared to give me the address. After all, I don't know how to find you, so I can only let you come to me," Luochio said casually. Song Howren directly put away the address and showed a charming smile. "If I can eat the authentic braised meatballs, that would be even better." "Definitely." Luochio then climbed down the small water pipe. Song Howren didn't withdraw his gaze until he saw Luochio land, and the police station opposite sent people to contact him. Then, he glanced at Luvia and Oni, and they directly carried Bucky and quickly left. Finally sent out the address. Song Howren should come, right? Luochio's face showed a smile. At this time, Dr. Frankie was staring worriedly at the top of the theater, his face full of melancholy. At this time, the servant girl quietly walked past the old doctor. Her hand quietly swiped, and a black card was stuffed into Dr. Frankie's pocket. The servant girl smiled at her master. Luochio showed a harmless smile, and the two walked directly in front of the police who came to greet them. But the police could only see Dr. French. What happened? Only then did Frankie come over, only to find that the young man and woman had disappeared. "You're Dr. French, right?" A middle-level police officer looked at Dr. French with a little respect at this time. The doctor's face was gloomy, and he hurriedly said, "The leader of Billy's party is also inside. You better work harder." "What? Not only the head of the Senate, but also the leader of the proportional party?" Hearing this news, the sheriff hurriedly reported, "That was the leader of the party." Now that the president was about to change, no one could say for sure whether the next one in power would be Mr. Billy's regime or not. After that, Dr. Frankie was taken to a safe place to wait. He didn't want to leave just like that. He looked at the theater that was surrounded by soldiers from afar and muttered to himself, "Ever since the big explosion, my research has been frozen. The country doubted my ability and has been unwilling to provide me with research funds. This time, Mr. Billy is finally willing to support me and buy foreign technology for me. Please don't have an accident. You want to fulfill your wish, no matter what it is." Something was whispering in Dr. Frankie's ears, which made his heart tremble. "Haven't you caught them yet? Roger, your men seem to have ordinary abilities." In the VIP room, Crocodile shook his head, seeming a little disappointed. Roger indifferently said, "They won't be able to escape. Besides, Buggy is also involved. I believe that they'll be able to catch this big fish for me very soon. However, I really didn't expect that in addition to the head of the Senate, there is also a party leader in this concert. It seems that Buggy is really a lucky guy. He just came and gave me a big surprise." "Lucky bastard." Crocodile shook his head, then stared at the information that Roger had taken out not long ago with a dignified expression. The country that was powerful enough to clamor with the world's overlords before and after World War II had now disintegrated. But what Roger found was the legacy left by the country before its disintegration. Nuclear weapons were a terrible thing. Strictly speaking, this thing was a hard standard to measure whether a country could be ranked as a powerful country. From the moment they saw this information, Doflamingo and Moria didn't make a sound. The faces of these two vipers were gloomy and terrible. They seemed to be surprised that Roger could find such a terrible thing. Suddenly, Doflamingo sighed and said with a sly smile, "So that's how it is. Is this your confidence? Very good. Roger, no matter what you want to do, count me in." "I knew you would agree." "Moria?" Roger looked at Moria, who was sitting on Jose's body. This guy showed a ferocious smile at this time, as if he was too excited to control himself. He looked up and pulled the pistol in front of Jose's head. The bullet directly penetrated Jose's head. At the same time, he stood up directly at the moment when Jose fell powerlessly. "I have no reason not to participate. What about Crocodile?" Roger nodded with satisfaction and looked at Crocodile just now. Crocodile shrugged and said indifferently, "Only Buggy's opinion. But I think we can ignore his opinion, because he doesn't dare to say no." "Ha ha ha." Roger laughed a few times, Then, the real first step, let's overthrow the current regime. Doflamingo and the others looked at Roger at the same time, showing an expression of as expected. This guy is really going to launch a coup. This is not a chaotic small country in Africa, but a big country in South America. Sure enough, he is a madman. Roger clapped his hands at this time and asked someone to bring out the Senate president. He looked at the white-haired, terrified old man and revealed a playful smile. I've changed my mind. From now on, in 30 minutes, have the president and his entire cabinet appear in front of me. I want to negotiate with the president directly. As usual, I will kill one person if you are late for 1 minute. You will be the first one. How can you gather so many people in 30 minutes? The Senate president was trembling at this time. Oh, shouldn't they be discussing the removal of the UPP at this time? They should have already gathered, right? Isn't it convenient to come together? Roger sneered. The old Senate president's eyes widened. For a moment, he seemed to think of something. Was the condition of removing the troops just an inducement? The real purpose was to gather all the people in the center of national power? Roger directly asked someone to throw a phone to the Senate president, then looked at the time and said, "Now the countdown begins. I hope you can be on time." The old man's hands were shaking at this time. He felt that the phone was like a 10-kilogram dumbbell, extremely heavy. "Minister, the approximate location of all the bandits has been confirmed. In addition, Director Jose is dead. The bandits want His Excellency the President and cabinet ministers to appear in 30 minutes. The situation is critical." In the command car, the Minister of Security, with a grave expression, wiped the sweat off his face. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Storm Squad, attack. The first mission is to rescue the Senate President. Send the order to the Trojan horse and let it create an opportunity." Roger. The technician hurriedly pressed the button. Storm Squad, prepare to attack. That night, there was an unprecedented traffic jam in Rio. The whole city seemed to be shaking because of the roar of car horns. After escaping from the hospital, Caroline walked into a taxi in a daze, her heart in a mess. Being caught in a big traffic jam made Caroline even more impatient. "Driver, what's going on in front?" The driver looked back at the female passenger in surprise. "Don't you know? There was a big hijacking in the theater. A lot of people with status were kidnapped by the bandits. They still have to negotiate with the country. I heard that they want the president to be there in person. I've been talking about this on the radio." Caroline was stunned. She had not been paying attention to what the radio said. Now that she was listening carefully, her expression became one of astonishment. This city. What was going on tonight? Chapter 790. Pastel was a delicious snack commonly seen on the streets of Rio. It was a bit like the smoked meat pie in China. It was made by spreading flour into a square, then wrapping it in cheese, adding beef or chicken, and finally frying it in a pan of oil. The vendor had already fried several servings of pastel, but no one was interested. The reason was naturally because of the theater hostage incident that completely paralyzed the traffic on the busiest road in Rio. Of course, the peddler didn't care much about this small amount of sales. He was also paying attention to the latest information about the theater incident on Twitter, as well as the congratulatory messages sent by various people. It was the so-called insider information. All in all, that night, Rio was full of demons and devils, and the onlookers were tirelessly participating in the unprecedented discussion. "I want 2 servings of pastel." "Oh, wait." Although he was a little reluctant because he was watching the most interesting part of the gossip, the vendor still responded to the customer who came to his stall, a young customer. "Oriental?" The vendor looked at the young man in surprise. There was a woman behind the young man. She was wrapped in a suit jacket. Her skirt was probably torn or something, but she was still in the mood to buy food here. Shouldn't she be watching from the front and becoming a member of the great audience? The vendor was absent-minded as he packed the food. His eyes never left his phone. "There should be a lot of people over there who are hungry. Maybe you could bring some fresh pastel and ask the crowd to buy. I think business should be good." After the young man took the 2 servings of pastel from the vendor, he smiled. The vendor was stunned. Then he slapped his head. F***CK. Why didn't I think of this as the best time to do business? There are so many people here. There must be a lot of people who haven't eaten dinner yet. Thank you. Where's she? The vendor could no longer see the young man, and even the woman who was waiting for him had disappeared. But he didn't think too much about it. Instead, his hands were almost invisible as he madly made fresh pastel. Then he put in a basket and rushed into the crowd, shouting, "Fresh pastel from the pot. Buy 3. Buy 4, get 1 free." Looking at the peddler brother who was yelling hard and starting to have business, the servant girl who was taking a bite of pastel smiled faintly. The ingredients are not very fresh, but the sauce is specially made, so it tastes good. For street food, it's indeed very good. The boss smiled. Yui took a handkerchief and wiped the grease from the boss's mouth, so that her master could be a clean and quiet foodie. Speaking of which, I forgot to return this pistol. Boss Luo took out a pistol, which was given to him by Song Howren. He shook his head. "Forget it. I'll return it the next time we meet." Yui suddenly asked, "Master, Mr. Song has that thing on him. Is it okay?" Luochio said indifferently, "It's just a remnant soul that has just been born. No matter what kind of glory or power it had in the past, it has now disappeared in the long river of history. Whether it succeeds in becoming Song Howren or Song Howren succeeds in becoming it, that's the fate between him and it. But is it an ancient relic hidden in the depths of the jungle? It seems that there may be other gains in this trip to South America." The servant girl didn't ask any more questions. Her master only cared about the story behind his father's life, not the so-called blood relatives. Speaking of which, I've only done one business here in a few days. It's not very good. Luochio pondered for a moment. I can almost hear a lot of desires. Then, I'll take a little more business. Hearing this, the servant girl nodded, put down the pastel that she had just eaten, and stood up. But Luochio pulled her to sit down again and whispered, "Don't worry, finish eating first." With that said, he also wiped a touch of grease from the edge of Yuye's lips with his sleeve and whispered, "I solidified your taste bud so that you can remember the taste of all the delicacies." And the servant girl responded softly. The boss raised his hand, and a light screen appeared on his left. The image that appeared was of Caroline, who was stuck in a taxi on the road. After a glance, Boss Luo no longer paid attention to it. Then, he looked towards the theater. This glance peeled off all the outer walls of the theater, leaving only the internal structure of the theater in sight. This iconic building no longer had any secrets. Luvia originally thought that after sending Dr. Frankie and the other two away, Song Howren would plan to hide and wait for the real rescue outside, or mix in with the hostages again to create more opportunities to leave. But Song Howren asked Bucky to contact the bandits who were arresting Mr. Billy. It seemed that he really intended to meet these bandits. Rumor has it that Mr. Billy is a very grateful person. Song Howren smiled and said, "I wonder how he will repay us after we save him." Luvia couldn't help but complain. Military counselor, no matter how grateful a person is, he is still a politician. "Okay," Song Howren said. "That's even better. Politicians are often the ones who hire us the most. Dad has accumulated a lot of clients over the years, so I also need to accumulate my own clients." Oni didn't oppose Song Howren's plan, or it could be said that he needed to see blood tonight, but it was stopped. He was already a bit impatient. If I go back and my wives know that I was kidnapped, they will definitely laugh at me. I don't want this to be a stain in my life. Luvia was still a bit conservative. She was full of worries and resisted Song Howren's adventurous character from the bottom of her heart. Song Howren suddenly lifted Luvia's chin and said intimately, "Besides, don't forget our action tonight." Although Dad said to stop the action temporarily, there is no such word in Song Howren's dictionary. She couldn't win this man's wild beast-like eyes under the noble young master's shell. You will definitely become the king of iris flowers. According to Song Howren's instructions, Oni and Luvia were directly lying in ambush at this time, waiting for the people who were chasing Billy to appear and then ambush them unexpectedly. As for Buggy, Song Howren personally looked after him and directed his actions. "Hey, kid, you're not really a government person, are you?" Buggy's eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. You're not a mole in the police force, are you? Song Howren replied in a neutral tone. Let's make a deal. If you let me go, I can give you unimaginable wealth. Brother, we're just looking for wealth. There's no need to lose our lives. Buggy quickly suggested. Song Howren curiously asked, You seem to believe that Roger can win this round? The outside is full of armed forces, and this place is impenetrable. Do you really think he can easily escape? Or do you really think that he has the capital to negotiate with the country with these hostages in his hands? Buggy shook his head. According to what you said, there is no such thing. Both sides are just stalling for time. Including the release of me and Moria, it's all a snatch of time. But we old guys watched Roger grow up. Although he is a complete madman, he is not a fool. He will never do things that he is not sure of. That's why I think he might have some crucial cards up his sleeve. A card that really makes him dare to talk to the country is called the Ace of Spades. You're not as stupid as the rumors say. Song Howren nodded and suddenly said, Do you know that Roger buried a lot of explosives here that can raise this place to the ground in a few seconds? Buggy's face changed dramatically at this moment, and he looked at Song Howren in horror. If it's true, damn, why didn't I just climb the drainage pipe with the old man and the young couple and leave? It's too dangerous here. I want to go back to prison. Are you sure I'm joking? Song Howren looked at Buggy with a playful look. Buggy's face was pale, and he smiled bitterly. Roger can do it. During the Great Hunt back then, this madman lured all the enemies to his father's side and used his father as a shield. Only then was he able to escape. So there is nothing he can't do. I won't let you go. If you dare to leave now, I will kill you directly. Song Howren's eyes were murderous. Buggy looked depressed and felt that luck had left him. He had to say with a sullen face, What do you want me to do? Of course, it's something that suits your current identity. Song Howren smiled. I am a government person, and you are a mole in the police. We naturally need to cooperate, don't we? If you don't want to die here, then you'd better display your value to the fullest. Buggy sighed. He was helpless and full of hatred. He stared at Song Howren and said, I know, you and Roger are actually the same type of people. Your ambition is boundless. Thank you for the compliment. Song Howren handed a dagger to Buggy. I've always been friendly to my collaborators. Buggy frowned and finally took the dagger. He really didn't want to participate in any of Roger's actions. He really felt that prison was more suitable for him. Even if he didn't know what Roger was planning behind the scenes, the kidnapping incident alone was enough of a crime. He was sure that the officials he had spent a lot of time building a good relationship with would never protect him afterward. I'm sorry, Luo Jia. I really just want to be a quiet person in prison. Looking at Buggy's eyes, Song Howren knew that this guy had been successfully instigated. Haven't you caught the big fish yet? Your people are really slow. Crocodile frowned. Roger said indifferently, It's just a hidden rat. It can't run far. Anyway, there's still some time. Just treat it as an entertainment. Crocodile snorted and suddenly looked at the Senate leader who was guarded in the corner. He grinned. Speaking of which, I have a personal grudge with this old guy. Roger, let me have a good chat with this old guy. Oh, Roger was a little curious. Crocodile looked at the old Senate leader and sneered. This old guy has probably forgotten how much trouble the bill he promoted 5 years ago brought to me. You mean the foreign trade case 5 years ago? The old Senate leader was surprised. You may not know that my business is foreign trade. Thanks to your care, my business has suffered a great loss. Crocodile sneered and walked directly to the old man. He grabbed his hair and dragged him to the door. Give me 20 minutes. I promise to let him come back alive. Roger waved his hand, but let people follow him. He said indifferently, Watch him closely. This old man can't take a beating. Don't let Crocodile accidentally kill him. Got it, boss. One of the men nodded and followed him out. Moria shook his head. I heard that this guy killed a lot of people in prison. Why is he still so rude after such a long time? Brother Ming, why don't you talk? You've been silent since just now. Are you thinking of something bad? I'm suddenly curious about one thing. Brother Ming looked at Roger. How did you find such a horrible guy? I don't believe in the existence of these big guys, but I'm curious. Why did you get it? Roger said indifferently. I'll tell you later. Of course, I know your character. If you don't figure it out, you will never give up. But, Brother Ming, I want to remind you that the world is very big. Sometimes, some things are far beyond your knowledge. When you really come into contact with some things, you will know how small the world was in the past. Doflamingo frowned. I don't like this kind of rhetoric, but Doflamingo couldn't say it because the walkie-talkie Roger was holding on the table suddenly exploded at this time. It was a scream. Everyone could hear that the voice belonged to Bucky. Roger. Reinforcements. Reinforcements. Help. What happened? Roger picked up the walkie-talkie and asked directly. After waiting for 10 seconds, there was no sound from the other side. He then called another person who was sent to catch Billy, but there was no response. Roger's face was gloomy like an extinct volcano. It seems that this big fish bit the net. Moria chuckled. Billy? Crocodile and the senator have some old feelings that need to be contacted. I also have some things to visit this guy. Wait. Roger frowned. Things are a bit strange. Including Bucky and Badu, we have a total of 5 people. According to the report, there are only 2 bodyguards around Billy, and they only have pistols in their hands. What do you want to say? Doflamingo looked at Roger with interest and suddenly smiled. You said Bucky is a fraud? That coward? Be careful. You will live longer, Roger said indifferently. He waved his hand and said, except for the people who control the scene in the concert hall and the first line of defense, the rest of the people follow me. Moria and Brother Ming, you come too. In addition, tell Crocodile that if the president's people don't appear in 15 minutes, throw the senator's body out of the window. Everyone acted. In the concert hall, in addition to the conductor who died directly in front of everyone at the beginning, there were several other bodies. These people were directly killed by Roger when he was amused. The bodies were piled up casually in the corner. In front of him, there were 8 burly men with submachine guns in their hands, standing in different positions. How many guests were there in the concert hall? Of course, it was dozens of times more than these 8 gangsters. But the problem was, who dared to hit the ruthless muzzle? They had been pampered for too long. They cherished life and were unwilling to fight for the precious future. Mom, I want to go home. There was the sound of children sobbing in the crowd, but soon someone reached out to cover it, for fear of provoking the ferocity of these fanatics. Oh God, please save us. God, who cares? What's wrong with the police? Husband, I'm scared. Panic and despair seem to have found the best hotbed, growing at a terrifying speed and shrouding everyone's heads. Then they seem to hear something whispering. Chapter 791. In terms of form, the operation was similar to the virtual game world that Miss Maid and Taienzi had created together. It sold a single product and let customers who were willing to buy such things buy it. Of course, this time it was not a product that the club actively produced. It just happened to be in a situation that was desired by more than one people. Product name: survival. In order to survive, humans were often willing to give up a lot of things. I'm about to die. What else do I have to hold on to? Of course, the public thought so. Fear and despair bred in this huge concert hall. As time went by, the desire of the hostages here had been pushed to the peak. The police didn't take any action for a long time. They were isolated from the outside world. Every second was as sad as the end of the year. The shadow lingering in their hearts couldn't be removed. Evil thoughts were born. Who can save me? Even the devil can. Outside the theater, on the rooftop of a building facing the theater, Miss Maid, who had finished a delicious pastel, looked at Boss Luo. There are a total of 479 hostages and a total of 263 people who are willing to buy the survival service. This was equivalent to only doing one thing, but the transaction fee of 263 customers was obtained. Although the quality might not be comparable to any of Boss Luo's previous orders, in terms of pure quantity, it was one of the top 3 deals he had ever done. Do you still want to wait, Master? Miss Maid's eyes were bright. She was naturally in charge of accepting the order this time. Normal Black Soul envoys didn't have the complex calculation ability of Miss Maid. She had to contact all the hostages and complete 263 parts of the contract, which was equivalent to dividing her spirit into a certain number of parts. Each part of her spirit would communicate with a customer. This was no longer a simple field of doing two things at once. The police have started to take action. Luaccio shook his head at this time. No one knows if the police's rescue process will irritate the gangsters. In the conflict, if the customers who have reached the contract are hurt, it means we broke our promise. We don't have to wait. Of course, he could wait until the last moment. He could even wait until the next day. All he had to do was to add something like a protective shield to each customer so that they would be intact even under the impact of the explosion. However, the price he would have to pay would naturally be greater. After the event, he would have to eliminate the effects of this miraculous event. That would be a complete loss. In addition, the pricing this time was surprisingly good. Each customer only had to pay 3 months of life. Was 3 months of lifespan a lot? Different people had different opinions. When some people fell seriously ill, their vitality would be depleted. If they didn't get good rest and replenishment, their life would be shortened by 1 or 2 years. But at the same time, he was only doing one thing. However, lifespan was one of the cheapest types of transaction fees. Strictly speaking, the profit he made was next to nothing. Fortunately, there were a lot of orders, so it was barely acceptable. Boss Luo waved his hand, and the space in front of him was distorted. In the middle of the whirlpool, something seemed to be floating. It was all the high explosives that the criminals had buried in the theater. Replace. Boss Luo snapped his fingers again. Suddenly, a large amount of gray powdery substance was separated from each of the explosives. Then new things were filled in. They were replaced with a kind of simple black gunpowder. When so many explosives exploded at the same time, the power was probably equivalent to a firecracker with 300,000 sounds. Boss Luo stretched out his hand and pushed slightly. The explosives that were pulled out from the space whirlpool were slowly pushed into the whirlpool. Finally, everything returned to normal. In this way, even if Roger presses the detonator, there won't be any casualties. Boss Luo smiled. The only thing left is their guns. You go and walk around. Boss Luo shook his head at this moment. Completing the distribution of goods with the least effort and making more money by taking advantage of the situation. He seemed to hear a pleasant laughter in his mind. The altar that was imagined as a lowly's voice seemed to be saying, "This is the right way to open the door." Then he would treat it as occasionally satisfying this altar that could eat a lot of things. Boss Luo smiled and looked at Yu Yi, who had changed back in her work clothes, jumping toward the theater in front. Suddenly, he took out the golden Suharto camera just to record this scene. Let's call it Fragrant Trace Under the Moon's Shadow. To Buggy's surprise, the other two subordinates of Song Howren were F** King awesome fighters. Although they had killed Batu and obtained his equipment, the 3 fellows that Oni and Luvia had to deal with were also fully armed, dangerous players. This man and woman actually killed the 3 people silently. Buggy couldn't even hear any gunshots. You are mercenaries? Buggy suddenly came to such a conclusion. The ordinary ones, such as the large number of his former subordinates, were the idle people of the original society that he had recruited, or the poor children. These people could only form combat power through general training, but their combat power would not be too strong. Only those mercenaries who risked their lives, or soldiers trained in the army, could have such means. The latter, Oni and Luvia, were naturally not the latter. Otherwise, why would Song Howren say those words of cooperation to him? What do you think Roger will do next? Song Howren did not answer but asked, Does he suspect you? Or does he not suspect you? Buggy's face was gloomy. Anyway, deceiving Roger this time was equivalent to betraying him. Of course, in the gray world, betrayal was a common thing. Roger had also betrayed his father directly before. It was just a common thing, but it did not mean that he could accept it when he was betrayed. Roger would definitely shoot him directly. It seemed that there was no way to get off Song Howren's pirate ship. He hoped that the ship would not capsize. I think he will send someone to confirm it again. Buggy thought about it, and felt that this was the most likely possibility. However, Song Howren's eyes lit up as he said, Why didn't he do it himself and cut the Gordian knot? It can't be. Buggy hesitated. You will know later. Song Howren smiled indifferently, and then showed a smile, Now, let me get to know the leader of Billy's gang. Luvia, invite Mr. Billy here. Be polite. In less than 10 seconds, Oni and Luvia brought 3 embarrassed men to Songhauren. 2 of them were bodyguards. One of them was bleeding from his arm, and the injury was not very serious. As for Mr. Billy, his face was pale. Obviously, he was too frightened. But after all, he was a gang leader and was still calm at this time. Mr. Billy, who was in his 40s, was at the peak of his career. Naturally, he had the spirit of a big boss. Which department do you belong to? In Billy's view, these people had extraordinary skills. They fought with the gangsters and saved him. For the time being, they could be classified as non-enemies. But he was not sure whether they were allies or not. Songhauren said, "Let's not talk about this first. Mr. Billy, we have successfully sent Dr. Frankie out. Please come with me." "Doctor." Mr. Billy was startled and then showed a touch of joy. He nodded in surprise. "Thank you. No matter who you are, I will not forget your kindness in the future." He could hear that Songhauren seemed to be deliberately hiding his identity. Now that there was a crisis, he was not a person who stuck to trifles, so he simply followed good advice. At this time, there was a series of urgent sounds. It was the sound of shooting. At the same time, there was an arrogant voice. "Buggy, come out. I know you won't die like this." "Buggy, it's Roger. He's here." Buggy's eyes shrank at this time, and the word fear was written in his eyes. He looked in the direction of the gunshot and could not help but take a step back. "It's faster than I thought." Songhauren narrowed his eyes and walked towards the direction of the gunshot. "Wait, what do you want to do?" However, the injured bodyguard beside Mr. Billy could not help but frown and say, "At this time, we should not fight with the other party. We should go this way." He pointed to the other side of the corridor in the opposite direction. Songhauren said faintly, "When you want to block a person, will you blatantly tell others that you are there?" The bodyguard was startled and frowned. "You mean he deliberately told us the location so that we would retreat and go to the other side, and then ambush us? Then can you follow me now?" Songhauren smiled, but the bodyguard still hesitated. "This is just your guess. How can you be sure? What if he deliberately led us to think this way? We don't know how many people they have. Even if there is only a slight possibility, we can't put Mr. Billy in danger. In fact, you're already in danger." Songhauren said indifferently, "Opportunity waits for no one. If you miss it, you will miss it. So I don't intend to waste time here to persuade you. Whether you want to follow me or not is up to you. Mr. Billy? We might be able to climb from the VIP box to the next floor." Another bodyguard suddenly suggested. Oni snorted disdainfully and said with a sneer, "Fine, go ahead and crawl. There are at least 7 or 8 guns waiting for you in the concert hall. If you can't hit such an obvious target, you must be blind. Your bodyguard hasn't graduated yet, right?" "You!" "Enough!" Mr. Billy shouted at this time, and then looked at Songhauren and said seriously, "I will trust you this time. I will follow you. I like your courage." Songhauren sincerely sighed. Big shots naturally cherished their own feathers more, but this Mr. Billy's courage was different from the others. Mr. Billy bitterly smiled. "You definitely won't go this way. My bodyguard and I are exhausted. If we encounter the bandits again, we won't be able to deal with them. Besides, it's not good for us to scatter now. Young man, I hope your judgment won't push me into the fire pit. I also hope that I will have the opportunity to repay you in the future and not resent you in the afterlife. If Mr. Billy can take care of my business in the future, that will be enough." Songhauren smiled evilly, looking relaxed. Nevertheless, he still took the P-90 that he had just captured from Oni. "Leader, do you think they will rush to our side?" A brawny man showed a grim smile, and his finger was always on the trigger of the gun, aiming at the end of the corridor, waiting for the prey to appear. The person lying in ambush on the other side is Brother Ming. No matter where the big fish goes, they can't escape. Roger sneered, "I have to go back in 10 minutes. Leader, there seems to be movement." "Wait, don't shoot." But they heard a frightened cry. The person who appeared in the corridor was Buggy. Buggy's face was a bit ugly at this time. His face and clothes were covered with dark red, sticky liquid. He looked like a bloody man. "Roger, it's me, don't shoot." Buggy raised his hands and walked toward Roger with trembling legs. Roger, with a total of 3 men. He looked at Buggy coldly, as if he was thinking about something, and suddenly said, "They're behind you?" "Roger, don't shoot." Buggy nodded nervously, and at the same time, he tilted his head back, revealing the person behind him. It was Songhauern. He aimed the P-90 behind Buggy, and his eyes finally met Roger's as Buggy moved. "Roger, don't shoot." The atmosphere fell into a strange silence, and only Buggy's trembling voice sounded. Bucky, on the other hand, slowly walked towards Roger and the others. Songhauern, on the other hand, maintained a distance of less than 2 feet from Bucky. Using Bucky as a shield, he also slowly moved forward. I don't like being threatened by the enemy. When the 2 sides are less than 5 meters away, Roger suddenly snorted coldly. At the same time, there was a clicking sound. It was the sound of a gun being loaded. "But I just want to get out of here safely." Songhauern gritted his teeth and looked nervous. "There are so many hostages down there. It doesn't matter if I'm there or not. I just want to get out of here. This person is very important to you, right? Don't lose this guy for my cheap life." Roger narrowed his eyes and suddenly asked, "Are you Billy's bodyguard?" Songhauern nodded. "Mr. Billy was shot and is now hiding in the water bar on the 3rd floor. You can ask someone to find him." Roger sneered. "Betraying your employer, you really don't seem to be a qualified bodyguard." Songhauern said indifferently, "No matter how much you earn, what's the use if you don't have a life to enjoy it? Staying alive is the most important. So, as long as you get out of the way and let me get out of here safely, I promise I won't touch a hair on this guy's head. Otherwise," he showed an extremely ferocious expression and said bitterly, "otherwise, I'll die with him." Roger's eyes were still gloomy. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Songhauern, but suddenly picked up the walkie-talkie. Brother Ming, Big Fish is in the water bar on the 3rd floor. Go and take a look. Brother Ming, reply if you receive. Over." Cha-cha. The walkie-talkie sounded like an electric current. Leader, Brother Ming fired at us. He is a mole." Hearing the voice from the walkie-talkie, Roger's face suddenly changed. He was stunned on the spot, as if he couldn't digest the news for a while. At the same time, in the entire concert hall, the entire theater, all the light sources stopped in an instant. The main power seemed to have been cut off. Bang, 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 bang. "Leader, the police suddenly attacked. They know the location of our ambush." Leader, "Ah." In the darkness, another voice sounded from the walkie-talkie. The moment the lights completely disappeared, Buggy instinctively crouched down. Because at the moment the lights went out, Songhauern and Roger's men began to fight at the same time. Chapter 792. Becoming an overlord, sitting on a large region, hundreds of subordinates, and hundreds of guns and ammunition. He deserved to be a local emperor, okay? Of course, it was good, but this was not ancient times. The chaotic situation would eventually be eliminated, and the old era would always be defeated by the wishes of the masses. From a long time ago, or rather, since he was still in the imperial capital headquarters, Ming had already known that this was a road of no return. Even a behemoth like the imperial capital headquarters was ultimately defeated by the state apparatus. However, although the country was still in a chaotic situation because of historical problems, history was ultimately deduced by people. Ming didn't want to become a person eliminated by history, and he didn't want to be restricted by the state system. So, he would become the rule maker. Enlistment. This was a good opportunity. Although it happened suddenly, Ming keenly captured the opportunity to change his life. Years of prison life had already changed Ming a lot. In prison, he was not disturbed by anyone. When he was really quiet, he could think about the future. For a big shot at his level, going to prison did not mean losing everything. Buggy, the coward, could also live like a member of the royal family in another prison. This country had already become so corrupt. In a few years, in prison, Ming self-taught a lot of knowledge and even got several degrees. He began to plan another way out of life. He was born a smart person. When he was a child, he grew up in a wealthy family and even had an official background. It was just that his family became a victim in the political struggle of the country. This time, Roger's request gave the country a big headache, and Ming knew that his opportunity had come. Although he was in prison, the crime was not serious. The real felony had been taken on by him as a scapegoat, so he was only sentenced to 13 years in prison at first. This time, he agreed to be an official mole, so he was pardoned for the rest of the sentence. Mr. Minister of Security, your Senate President is currently taken away by Crocodile. This should be a good opportunity for you. The location is... In addition, I will directly clear the blockade of the gate for you. Brother Ming turned off the communicator that he carried with him and wiped the blood off his face. The subordinates that Roger asked him to bring with him to ambush Billy's group had all fallen. It was very easy to get rid of these fellows who were full of respect and admiration for his past deeds. Even Moria, who used to work together with him, fell in a pool of blood at this time, with confusion in his eyes. He died without knowing why. Before they died, they probably never thought that such a vicious and evil person would actually become the government's lackey. Well, Brother Ming didn't like the term lackey, or it should be called collaborator. However, there was a small mistake. There was actually a guy who was not dead and had informed Roger in time. However, it didn't matter anymore. As long as the police's special operations team took action, they would naturally take care of the bandits in the concert hall at an extremely fast speed. The biggest problem was the detonator in Roger's hand. However, Brother Ming did not think that Roger would have the idea of dying together with the enemy. After all, this was a ruthless person who was willing to betray his own father in order to survive. Perhaps after washing away his identity as a gang leader, it would be a good choice to appear with another identity. The funds he transferred before he went to prison were quite sufficient. Then, how about becoming a senator and then a politician? But Roger actually mastered that kind of thing. Ming sneered, "Let me take this kind of thing." Of course, he did not report some of his conversations with Roger. Ming laughed strangely and moved forward in the darkness, but his steps were light as if he was walking on a sunny road. A few minutes before the power went out, listening to the screams in the room, the gangster who followed Roger's order to Crocodile yawned in boredom, lit a cigarette, and smoked comfortably. Boss Crocodile had always been famous for his cruelty and liked to torture and kill. Although the old man was not killed by the leader, when he came out, he was afraid that he would be hanging on by his last breath. Inside the room, just as the bandits outside had thought, the head of the Senate was already drenched in cold sweat, and his face was bruised and swollen. At this time, Crocodile pulled the old man's tie with one hand, making him grasp his collar in pain and struggle. Seeing the old man's painful expression, Crocodile grinned. "Dear Uncle Bervold, you never thought that you would fall into my hands one day, did you?" "Crocodile, don't make mistakes. Make mistakes again," the old man begged with difficulty. "Uncle, since you married into the Cape Don family, you have tried to distance yourself from us poor relatives. The Cape Don family does value you and even push you all the way to the position of senator. But uncle, aren't you a bit too ruthless?" Crocodile pressed the old senator's head against the wall, "But it doesn't matter. I don't intend to let people know that my uncle is you. Otherwise, after this release, the government may be interested in talking to me." Bervold saw stars and felt dizzy, but he suddenly felt a sense of regret. If he had not completely concealed his relationship with Crocodile since he came to power and let the government know some of it, maybe he would not be in such a dangerous situation now. Unfortunately, no matter how regretful you are, it's too late. Crocodile grinned. "In less than 10 minutes, I will throw your body out," as Roger said. "Dear Uncle Bervold, let me call you for the last time." He kicked Bervold's stomach hard, making Bervold spit out red and white turbid things, and his body twitched because of the pain. "Crocodile, my dear nephew, let me go. I don't have a long time to live." Bervold grasped Crocodile's trousers with difficulty, raised his head, and begged, I can give you all my wealth." He knew Crocodile's hatred for him. If it was another person, he would at least have a trace of confidence and would not beg bitterly. Crocodile directly stepped on Bervold's palm, as if breaking his finger bones, and then snorted, "How much wealth of the Cape Don family can you control?" I may not have less wealth than you, and I can even create more in the future. This country's prison exists in name only for me. Don't you know how much my wealth has increased over the past few years? Why did you ask me to hide behind the scenes? Idiot! I've been waiting for 20 years to kill you. 8 minutes. It's the first time I feel that time is so long. Looking at Crocodile's playful smile, Burvold was desperate. In the last few minutes of life, the joys, sorrows, and spicy came one after another. He had been seriously injured, and his body was already old. How could he bear it? Perhaps his internal organs had already been ruptured. Burvold only felt that everything in front of him became dim. Perhaps this was the moment of his death. The door of the room seemed to suddenly open, and someone rushed in, saying something to Crocodile. After hearing it, Crocodile did not seem to have any hesitation and directly grabbed a pistol from that person's hand and directly pointed it at his forehead. He even felt the cold breath of the muzzle. God, I don't want to die like this, even if I have to sacrifice my soul. I beg you. Narrowing his eyes, Burvold only felt that his eyelids were extremely heavy, and he gradually lost consciousness, as if waiting for him was an eternal darkness. The fire of life was weak like a candle in the wind, gradually extinguishing. Sir, the survival you requested has been delivered. It was a woman's voice. Enjoy the rest of your life. Although it's not much, I hope you can enjoy your old age. When it's over, please allow us to come and take your soul. The voice spiraled away like a dream. Burvold slowly opened his eyes and seemed to feel that the pain in his body was much better. Although he was still very weak, he could open his eyes and even recovered a lot of strength. But there was still darkness in front of him. But at this moment, the door of the room was opened again. It seemed to be kicked open. 4 fully armed and masked police troops rushed in at the same time. The strong lights installed on the guns illuminated the scene in the room, and Burvold also saw the situation in front of him. Crocodile had fallen to the ground, together with a criminal. What happened? Burvold's mind wasn't completely blank. He could at least tell that the fall of Crocodile and the criminals happened before the special forces broke in. How infuriating! Burvold suddenly felt angry. Why couldn't these incompetent guys appear in time? At that moment, Crocodile really wanted to kill himself if he didn't suddenly fall down. But who shot him? 2 living people had fallen down without a sound? Calling the headquarters. The head of the Senate has been successfully rescued. Calling the headquarters. The head of the Senate has been successfully rescued, and the criminal Crocodile has been captured. Roger. Now, please immediately protect the head of the Senate and evacuate from the safe route. No mistakes. Roger. Burvold's face was gloomy as he watched 2 special forces take the fainted Crocodile and the criminal away, and he followed the last special force and left quickly. Before you came in, did you see anyone or hear anything? Burvold suddenly asked. His voice was as oppressive as a beast in the corridor without light due to the power outage. No, the special force didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of the real big shot of the country. He respectfully said, when we came in, we saw the same scene as when you saw us coming in. Burvold rubbed his forehead. Enjoy the rest of your life. Although it's not much, I hope you can enjoy your old age in peace. When it's over, please allow us to come and take your soul as a reward. That voice seemed to be engraved in the bottom of his heart. Once again, it was a cold female voice. Burvold followed the special force and left quickly. He also intermittently heard the news about the scene from the communications of the Storm Squad members. The hidden outposts of the criminals have been cleaned up, starting to attack the concert hall. Shoot the target as soon as possible. Action. Something unusual happened. Report. All the criminals in the concert hall are unconscious. Before we arrived? Report the number of remaining criminals. Report the location of Roger, Moria, Bucky, and others. Roger has a detonator in his hand. Another mysterious coma? Burvold deeply frowned. But at this time, he had been tied with a belt and a steel cable. The Storm Squad members had sent him to the rooftop of the theater and were ready to send him out from there. The helicopter was on it. The gunshots sounded and stopped, and then suddenly sounded again. There were collisions and furious cries. After a few times, Bucky just held his head in panic and squatted on the edge of the wall. The gunshots didn't sound for a long time. In the darkness, Song Howren's voice sounded faintly. "Mr. Billy, follow me." The police seemed to have started to act. The sound of running could be heard. In the midst of the chaos, someone could be heard saying, "Quick, quick! Wait, wait for me." Bucky quickly stood up, but it was dark all around. There were two ends of the corridor, and he didn't know which one to go to. But at this time, the lighting system of the theater suddenly recovered. It was as bright as day, and Bucky's eyes suddenly felt a little painful. But he saw that beside him, 3 of Roger's men fell directly in a pool of blood, and Roger also fell to the wall with his head down, holding a dagger in his hand with blood on it. At the same time, at least 3 bullet wounds could be seen on his chest. Song Howren and others were just in front of him, about 7 or 8 meters away. A bodyguard's shoulder was dyed red, and Luvia also covered her arm. Song Howren didn't know when a bleeding scar appeared on the back of his hand. It seemed that in the short time of the power outage, the two sides had an extremely dangerous fight. "You didn't die? Forget it. Keep up." Song Howren looked back and glanced at Bucky. What a lucky guy. Bucky smiled bitterly and quickly got up. But at this moment, he glanced at Roger from the corner of his eyes, and suddenly his body tensed up. Roger suddenly looked up, his eyes like a ghost, looking at him. He was seriously injured, but he didn't die. "Bucky, you betrayed me." Roger showed a cold smile. "Not dead yet. You're really tough." Not far away, Song Howren shook his head, took a pistol from Luvia's hand, and quickly aimed at Roger's head. At a distance of less than 10 meters, he naturally would miss. But Roger quickly took something out of his tactical waist bag, and then suddenly stabbed it at his neck. Song Howren couldn't see what it was, but Bucky saw very clearly that it was a syringe, and it seemed to contain a dark blue liquid. Chapter 793. The bullet in the rifle barrel broke through the darkness and disappeared in a flash. The bullet, which had reached the subsonic speed, directly penetrated Roger's head. "It's over," Song Howren thought. "Military advisor? This guy is still." Luvia's words made Song Howren frown. After Roger's head was shot, his reaction seemed a little strange. To be precise, Roger's body suddenly became a little strange. Blood vessels. The blood vessels on Roger's body began to swell, one by one, pulsating under his skin. It was even possible to see the contraction of the blood as it surged. "He's not dead." Roger's throat was producing a strange sound. It was very stifling. It was a scream, a low roar when enduring some kind of extreme pain. He should be dead. The probability of surviving a bullet piercing through the brain was 1 in 100 million. Song Howren naturally did not think that Roger was that lucky 1 in 100 million. All signs pointed to the strange changes in Roger's body at this time. His muscles began to grow like a Frankenstein monster. It was a level that made the world's bodybuilders flinch. Even Roger's skin began to turn light blue at this time. Green, no, blue giant? Oni looked at this scene in a daze. He only felt a chill go straight to the top of his head, and his scalp went numb. But he suddenly felt that his hand was empty. It turned out that the P90 in his hand was directly taken away by Song Howren. Song Howren did not hesitate at all for the mutated Roger. He directly swept the P90, a 50-bullet submachine gun with a P90. Mysterious. He had experienced it before, and now he even had a mysterious item on him. Therefore, Song Howren was able to wake up in the first place. God knows what kind of consequences this guy's body will bring after such a strange change is completed. Although he did not know the reason for this strange change, in Song Howren's opinion, who would foolishly watch the enemy complete the transformation? Of course, he should take advantage of the opponent's transformation to directly interrupt and kill this guy. Tap, 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 tap. Song Howren's finger tightened on the trigger of the P90. 3 bullets, 10 bullets, 20 bullets. Even after a full magazine was emptied, Song Howren did not stop. His movements were as fast as lightning as he reloaded the magazine, followed by a new round of frenzied fire. A full minute later, almost 2 minutes later, 100 bullets hit Roger, turning his body into a beehive. Countless mutated blue blood flowed out of Roger's body, and the wall behind him was densely filled with bullet marks. With the loss of a large amount of blood, Roger's body instantly shrank from swelling to shrinking. It was as if some of the essence in his body had been squeezed out. His shriveled appearance was almost reminiscent of prisoners who died of illness in prison. If Roger could speak at this moment, he would probably roar, so angry. The drug that he kept for the last time to turn the tables came from a mysterious force. He had fled in Russia for many years, and after several rounds of turnover, he became a quasi-cadre of this organization. Now, if Roger could successfully stir up a storm in this country and become the source of chaos, he would be able to become a senior member of this organization and come into contact with an even larger and more mysterious world. How could he not be angry? Let's die together. He felt the rapid loss of his life. With the last bit of strength left, Roger put his hand into his trouser pocket. Oh no, his detonator. Song Howard's expression changed dramatically at this time. Hearing his shout, everyone suddenly lost consciousness. Song Howard naturally mentioned that Roger had buried a large number of explosives in the theater. Their consciousness went blank because they felt the arrival of death. Without saying a word, Song Howard rushed to Roger's side and pulled out Roger's arm from under his stiff and strange smile. This guy was probably dead by now, but his hand was tightly grasping a small remote control. The bright red circular button had been pressed long ago. Song Howard could hear the rapid beeping sound like a countdown timer. Damn it, if I had known that when the power was restored, I would have found the detonator when I saw Roger, who was paralyzed and unconscious. But at that time, he had considered that since Roger was dead, there was no need to touch this thing. Next, he would let the police, who had broken in, deal with it. This would save him a lot of trouble. Moreover, Billy and the others were also present. It would be inconvenient for them to see him take this thing. But he did not expect that Roger was still alive and even had the chance to turn the tables, if he had not decisively fired 2 clips of bullets. However, this was not the time to regret. His brain experienced regret, anger, and panic in an instant, and he calmed down. Song Howard could only shout, "Everyone, get down." This was a device that could explode in an instant. Naturally, it was too late to move, so they could only lie on the ground. Whether they lived or died, they could only resign themselves to fate. For the first time, Song Howard left his fate to luck. Bang, bang. The air seemed to be frozen. Everyone lying on the ground could only hear a series of sounds. However, this sound was far beyond everyone's imagination. This sound was just like someone hitting the wall with a hammer. Even the slightest vibration could not be felt. Only the detonator made a long, buzzing sound at this time. Song Howard knew that this was the result of the explosion of the bomb. Military counselor? Luvia was still in shock and looked at Song Howard. Buggy was lying on the ground, holding his head with both hands. At this time, his chin was on the floor. He looked around with a confused expression. Song Howard frowned and said, "It's true that there were bombs, but they weren't as powerful as we thought. Roger lied to everyone." This, young Roger? Buggy subconsciously looked at Roger. His intuition told him that Roger was the kind of person who would really install a strong bomb. Let's not talk about it first. We have to leave this place quickly. Song Howard quickly got up. "Mr. Billy, the leader of the gangsters, Roger, is dead. I guess now the police are likely to have controlled the scene. We are basically in a safe state now." "That's good." Mr. Billy heaved a long sigh. At this time, a series of footsteps came quickly. They could even hear shouts such as, "The gunshots came from here," and "Hurry up, it may be the gangsters." They should have heard Song Howard's crazy gunshots and hurried to rescue them. Song Howard said decisively, "Mr. Billy, it's up to you now." But Mr. Billy suddenly fell to the ground at this time. Everyone was shocked. 2 bodyguards quickly helped Billy up. They took off his coat and found that Billy's waist was dyed red at this time. Did he get shot when they were fighting in the dark? I can still hold on. Mr. Billy was still conscious. Cold sweat dripped down his pale face, as if he would faint at any time. The moment he closed his eyes, he insisted, "Help them." "A bit." The bodyguard nodded. Then, he turned to Song Howren and the other two and nodded. Although he still did not know the identity and origin of these three people, if it were not for them, the result might have been different. Undoubtedly, his master, Billy, was a person who knew how to repay kindness. Back then, it was because he admired Billy's spirit that he followed Mr. Billy all the time. "Don't worry, I know how to tell the police," the bodyguard quickly said. "After that, you can take advantage of the chaos to leave. We will keep what happened today a secret." Song Howren nodded. He directly threw away all the weapons in his hands and walked together with Luvia, pretending to be innocent. Buggy took a long breath and sighed in his heart. "This time, I should be able to go back to prison, right?" At this time, Buggy walked in front of Roger and sighed. He reached out and wiped Roger's open eyes. He said somewhat sadly, "Roger, don't blame me. You also wanted to kill me. I was just protecting myself. In the future, I will apply to the prison to come out and pay my respects to you. Don't worry, I am very familiar with the prison warden. Every year, I will be on time to visit your grave." Buggy shook his head and was about to leave when he saw a black rope around Roger's neck. Out of curiosity, he pulled it and found that it was a short silver key. Without thinking, Buggy tore the thing off. Song Howren curiously asked, "What is that?" Buggy shook his head and said, "I don't know. I just want to keep a memento. If you want it, I will give it to you." After that, Buggy indifferently threw the necklace directly to Song Howren. Song Howren raised his hand and caught it. He looked at it carefully, but could not see what it was. He glanced at Buggy again, but saw that Buggy was still looking at Roger's body in a daze. He shook his head and threw the key back. "No, you can keep it as a memento." Buggy did not think much about it. He took it and stuffed it into the bag. At this time, a group of police rescue team rushed over. Buggy raised his hands in a very straightforward manner, as if to say, "I surrender. Don't hit me, just send me to prison." Song Howren did not know whether to laugh or cry. The bodyguard hurriedly said, "We fought with the criminals and killed them. In addition, this is Mr. Billy. He was shot. Hurry and send him to the hospital." Mr. Billy, this was a big shot. The group of Storm Squad naturally panicked and hurriedly called the medical staff. Song Howren and the others also followed behind the two bodyguards. Under the escort of a group of Storm Squad, they safely left. It seems that the situation has been completely under control. Their actions were fast enough. It had been less than 10 minutes since the power was suddenly cut off. It could be said that it was a race against time. Brother Ming walked alone in the cloister. After clearing the hidden sentries at the door so that the police could smoothly attack, he pulled out and searched for Roger. He had also heard the sound of frantic gunfire. Suspicious, he followed the sound to find the source. But when he came to the cloister where the shooting happened, only the bodies of Roger and several criminals were left. Roger's body even made Brother Ming feel unreal. Not to mention the terrible bullet marks on his body. Roger's withered appearance at this time made Brother Ming feel frightened. If it were not for the clothes and Roger's iconic long curly hair, Brother Ming even thought that he had recognized the wrong person. But Brother Ming did not think much. Time waits for no one. He quickly squatted down and looked for something on Roger's body. However, not long after, Brother Ming frowned, shocked and angry. The activation key of that thing. Who took away? Damn it. Brother Ming took a deep breath. The key may have been lost, or it may have been hidden by Roger somewhere. Maybe it was still somewhere in the theater. As for the possibility of it being taken away, when talking about this matter, he deliberately turned off the special communication equipment of the police. The only people who knew about it were himself, Roger, Moria, and Crocodile. Moria was killed by him, and Roger was dead. So, only Crocodile was left. But he kept a special communication with the police along the way and knew that Crocodile had been arrested early. It seemed that Roger had hidden it in advance. But where would it be hidden in the theater? Brother Ming took a deep breath and simply destroyed the information about the nuclear bomb that Roger carried. Naturally, it was best for him to know this kind of thing. And at this time, there are still people over there. Who? Come out. Two policemen ran over with guns. Brother Ming stood up directly, sorted out his emotions, and put down his weapon. He raised his hand and said, "Don't shoot. Ask your security minister who I am." The bodies of the dead bandits were naturally dealt with by another group of staff. Now was the critical time to search for any remaining bandits and whether there were other dangers in the theater. As for a large number of hostages held in the concert hall, they slowly walked out of the theater under the guidance of dozens of police officers. Many of them even shed tears of excitement. The hostage situation in the municipal theater that had lasted for several hours seemed to be coming to an end. However, in the quiet corridor, a beautiful figure slowly walked over to Roger's corpse. She looked down. Master is very interested in your soul. Although it is not a trade item, it is good as a collection. Her white fingers stretched out. From Roger's body, a black ink-like sphere slowly floated out and finally fell in her white palm. It's still fresh, very fresh. Like getting a new toy. On the roof of the building opposite the theater, Boss Luo held the black light sphere handed over by Miss Servant Girl and looked at it with interest. It's as quiet as the night, Luochio whispered. Rainbow soul spheres are rare, and so are the dark ones. Unfortunately, it is not a trade item. Miss Servant Girl felt a little pity. After assisting the club for many years, Miss Servant Girl also understood some of the rules of contribution. A magnificent soul sphere could give a good reward to the owner, so the value of the evil one was almost the same. Maybe it could be a trade item. Luochio thought for a while. I think it still has room for improvement. Master, are you going to help it reincarnate? Yi blinked curiously, then nodded and said, well, maybe after 10 years, it will go further. So let's put a mark on it. Miss Servant Girl was no stranger to this method. The former owner often used this method. As for the current owner, it seemed that this was the first time he tried this method. Time was almost meaningless to her. 10 years might pass by in the blink of an eye. But now, time had become active because it had a new master. Maybe the next 10 years would be very long. 10 years? Luochio smiled and shook his head. It won't take that long. Don't we already have one? Yi was stunned and then thought of something. Master, do you mean that it will be born in Tianzi's game world? Boss Luo smiled and nodded. Didn't Tianzi say that he wanted to make a hero spirit creation plan? Since that's the case, let's really put in a Demon King in that world. Savior and Demon King, a very traditional RPG game. With a snap of his finger, the black ball disappeared. What? A new soul was born? Tianzi was so anxious that he quickly got up from the armchair and put down the coconut that he had just drunk. Then he took off his sunglasses and beach clothes. A white light flashed on his body, and he looked like an immortal. Then the surrounding scenery changed. Immortal chi rose in spirals, and then a white light beam fell. My name is Taiyin, and I am... this guy's going to be reincarnated as a demon? Tianzi, who was about to give an opening speech, was stunned. He looked as if he had eaten a cockroach. But if he was the master of this world, then the one who gave him the order was at a higher level. His master. But it doesn't seem like he wants to be reincarnated as a demon. Tianzi rubbed his chin. A figure walked out of the light beam. His eyes were blank for a moment, but they soon became clear. Then he looked at the strange Tianzi warily. He realized that he was not wearing any clothes and was unarmed. But he could deal with such a weak old man with his physical strength. He should be fighting with someone in the theater and even using his last resort. How did he suddenly come to such a strange place? But the feeling of being alive was not wrong. Old man, where's this place? Give me clothes and food. I'm hungry. Oh, how dare you be rude to me? Old Taoist, this deity has transformed so many descenders, but you are the most arrogant one. Get lost and become a slime. Let's call him Stone Lime, too. In this world, although slime was not a pure-blood demon, strictly speaking, they were slaves and servants of the demon race. They were considered part of the demon race. Yes, so there was no problem. Tianzi waved his hand and swept the surprised man out of his secret realm with a look of disgust. Then he acted as if nothing had happened and put on his previous clothes. He took a sip of the coconut. Chapter 794. The traffic in the city began to gradually recover, but the blockade of the theater had not been lifted yet. Now the police were once again investigating the theater for danger, collecting evidence, and cleaning up the scene. These follow-up operations were naturally left to the second-line personnel to handle. The storm team, the riot team, and the like had already received orders and began to evacuate. The corpses of the bandits began to be packed in bags, then moved out one by one, and finally sent to a special transport vehicle. The captain had just ordered a newly delivered corpse. It was said to be a wanted criminal, but wasn't he already dead? The captain shook his head and watched the people continue to move the corpses into the theater. His son leaned against the front of the car and began to smoke and chat with his colleagues. Because of the captain's negligence at this time, he did not notice that in the dark night, a black shadow quietly sneaked into the car full of corpses. In the darkness, the person's appearance could not be seen clearly, but it seemed to be unable to stop the black shadow's movements in the car. The sound of a zipper being opened. When the bag was opened, what appeared was clearly a shriveled corpse. The corpse's body was also covered with blue liquid, or blood. This was obviously Roger's corpse. The black shadow took out two things from its arms. One was a strange spray, and the other was a small syringe filled with silver liquid. It sprayed the spray on Roger's body, and in an instant, the blue blood returned to dark red. Then, it injected the syringe into Roger's heart until the silver liquid was completely injected, and then it pressed its palm on Roger's chest. In the darkness, the palm emitted a faint light. At this moment, Roger's body seemed to have been hit by a strong electric shock and suddenly bounced. Again and again. After a few rounds, it finally retracted its hand. When Roger's corpse was delivered, it looked very horrible. His body was completely shriveled, and the blood vessels turned blue one by one. It looked very strange. However, after a few manipulations, all of this disappeared. Although the corpse was still shriveled, nothing valuable could be found. The corpse was not destroyed, but the traces were destroyed. The cleaning task is completed, the key search failed, the soul collection task failed, the soul in the target's body is gone, presumably collapsed. Its voice rang out in the darkness. It was surprisingly tender. Another voice slowly rang in its ears. Collapse? Luo Jie's soul should be a demon spirit, so it should not be that easily dispersed. Could it be that Paradise Island had made a mistake in their assessment? The key is missing? This is a bit troublesome, but only the key was not used. After all, the activator is in our hands. Forget it. Leave immediately and wait for the next mission. We have a few people like Roger in this country. Yes, it knew that according to Paradise Island, there were two types of souls in this world, the holy spirits that were real and the false spirits that were fake. As for the real holy spirits, due to falling into darkness, they would transform into demon spirits. However, they were still evolved from holy spirits. The place where they were born, Paradise Island, had an organization that specialized in evaluating them. Of course, this organization's evaluation may not be 100% accurate. In the past, the success rate was about 67.8%, so it was not surprising that the evaluation was wrong. It didn't feel anything about the fact that Roger wasn't a demonic spirit. In fact, it even felt a little more relaxed, because the recovery and preservation of demonic spirits or holy spirits required a lot of effort. Now that it was easy to leave, it was naturally the best. Special Affairs Team, number 03, evacuate. It said in a low voice. Then, it disappeared into the darkness, as if it had never been there. Then, a new body was carried over, and the coach started to load things again. Mr. Billy was shot and fainted. Outside the theater, Dr. Frankie, who was waiting here, heard the news, and his expression changed slightly. This was told by Mr. Billy's bodyguard himself, so there was no mistake. Doctor, Mr. Billy has been sent to the hospital's operating room as soon as possible. I'll ask someone to send you home. The bodyguard seemed to be a little indifferent to Dr. Frankie. In fact, he was also injured, but he didn't treat Dr. Frankie immediately. Instead, he arranged for Dr. Frankie to take care of him, which was already very benevolent. Then, when will he wake up? Dr. Frankie looked around and said in a low voice, "This time, our discussion with Leiden Corporation." "Doctor!" The bodyguard's voice suddenly deepened, as if he was angry, but he suppressed it. "I understand your dedication to the satellite launch, But please understand Mr. Billy's current situation. We'll talk about this after Mr. Billy wakes up. Also, those guests from Light & Company seem to have left, so I'm afraid they have some opinions about this negotiation. The conditions we discussed before may be a little different. If they change their conditions or ask for too much, Doctor, you better be mentally prepared. After all, we have limited resources here. I understand. Then, can I wait at the hospital until Mr. Billy wakes up? No need. I'll ask someone to send you home. Also, I need to go for treatment. Doctor, goodbye. Dr. Frankie sighed. Seeing the bodyguard leave, he could only helplessly leave with another driver who had just arrived. Doctor, are you going home? This wasn't the first time the driver had sent Dr. Frankie, so his tone was still quite relaxed as he asked with a smile. Dr. Frankie shook his head and muttered, "No need. Send me back to the laboratory of the university. There's still some data that I want to see." The driver complimented, "Doctor, you're really a great man." Dr. Frankie remained silent and simply closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, he seemed to see endless flames, and everything was destroyed in an instant. Defeated, he knelt down alone at the scene of the explosion, and everything turned into nothingness. An old man came to the command vehicle outside the street. He was the head of the parliament, Burvold. The head of the Ministry of Security was a bit cautious at this time. This old man held too much power, and his family also had a terrifying influence on the country. For a person like him who had worked hard all the way, even if he had the capital to resist, he still needed to cherish his own feathers. "Senator, it's our fault that Roger hijacked the theater this time. We didn't do enough intelligence work, and we've frightened you. Why get back? I'll reorganize the department and get rid of all those lazy people." The head of the Ministry of Security knew that this was the only thing he could say, which was useless, but could at least show his apology. "Where are the president and the others?" Burvold sat down with the help of others and asked indifferently. After the hostage incident was resolved, Mr. President and the cabinet members went back as soon as possible. The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly said, "After all, it's not safe outside, and we don't know if there are any remnants of the bandits. Did they go back or didn't come out at all?" Burvold asked abruptly. The head of the Ministry of Security hesitated for a while before saying, "Head of the Parliament, you're also injured. Should I arrange for someone to send you for examination right away?" Burvold snorted. "No need. I've already arranged for a family doctor. I'm here this time because I want to talk to you about something." The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly asked the other people in the command vehicle to leave, leaving only himself and the head of the Parliament. Then he said seriously, "Go ahead." Burvold stretched out two fingers. "Two things. First, Jose is dead, and the position of the chief of the Rio Police Department is vacant. I have several recommended candidates. You can evaluate them and see which one is suitable." The head of the Ministry of Security looked a little pale. In fact, before this old man came, several other big shots had sent him similar messages. "Is there a problem? Or do you have your own candidates? If you already have, I won't recommend them." Burvold glanced at the head of the Ministry of Security kindly. No. The head of the Ministry of Security hurriedly said, "The one who can be recommended by the head of the Parliament must be a rare talent. I'll think about it. So what's the second thing?" Burvold squinted. "I heard that 4 extremely serious criminals were released this time. One of them is called Moria, right? He's already dead." Burvold said, "Why should we keep people like him who will bring great harm to society? It's just a sentence, which means nothing to these people. So it's better for him to die." "You're right." The head of the Ministry of Security nodded, having no objection to Burvold's statement. "But it's a pity that only one of them died." Burvold sighed and shook his head. "If the other 3 guys also died in this fight, it's actually a good thing for us." It was said that when the head of the Parliament was rescued, he was in the same room with Crocodile and seemed to have been beaten up. It seemed that it was for revenge. The head of the Ministry of Security thought for a while and quickly made a decision. He suddenly patted his head. "Oh, how could I forget this? I heard that Crocodile was also seriously injured. I'm afraid he can't be saved." "Oh, really?" Burvold smiled, then stood up with his hands on his knees. "Oh, I fell down today, and I don't know where I fell. I have to go back and have a good look. Take care. By the way, only Crocodile can't be saved? Burvold suddenly turned back and asked before getting off the car. The head of the Ministry of Security gritted his teeth. It seems that Buggy is also one of them. As for Doflamingo, in fact, this time it was him who helped us to complete the rescue work. Burvold looked at the head of the Ministry of Security meaningfully, then nodded and said indifferently, I'm so old. I hope the Congress can work as usual next Monday. Take care. After Burvold left, the head of the Ministry of Security was relieved. Finally, this big Buddha was sent away. He shook his head and called the secretary who was waiting outside, whispering, Deal with Crocodile and Buggy. The secretary nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Sending the prisoners and sending them back were two completely different lineups. After all, the crisis had been solved. Even so, the transport van was still relatively secure, with police cars guarding the front and back. But of course, it couldn't be compared with the armed helicopters at the beginning. But the military naturally wouldn't casually transfer them. There were too many factors involved, so I won't go into details. In the prisoner van, Crocodile hadn't woken up yet. But even if he woke up, it would be useless because he was surrounded by heavily armed police officers. In addition, he was also put on a restraining suit, completely cutting off the possibility of struggling. The police car in front suddenly stopped. So did the entire convoy escorting the prisoners. It was a deserted area because this was the road leading to the suburban prison. Get off the van and smoke a cigarette. Take a rest, the driver suddenly suggested. Everyone agreed readily. There was only one guard left in the prisoner van. Seeing that everyone was chatting outside, he nodded, then took out a few packets of tissue and then covered Crocodile's face layer by layer. Until all 4 packets of tissue were covered, he unscrewed the bottle of mineral water and slowly soaked the tissue. Crocodile, who was in a coma, suddenly woke up at this time and then struggled to move his body, but he couldn't move. The restraining suit made his hands completely unable to free, and his body was pinned down. He made an angry sound in his throat. He first tried to break the wet tissue covering his face with his tongue, but the thickness of dozens of tissues made him helpless. His legs were struggling, and he was in extreme pain. However, the police officer held his body down tightly. Finally, Crocodile's legs stopped moving, without making a sound. After another 10 minutes, the police took the tissue away from Crocodile's face and then pretended that nothing had happened. At this time, the driver came back and started again. The group went to the prison as usual. Bucky tried to build a good relationship with the people in the van because he was too thirsty at the moment and wanted to get some water to drink. In addition, the escorts stared at him with dead fish eyes and didn't speak. This made Bucky, who always liked to be lively, feel that he was going to be moldy. Hey, are you new here? Why haven't I seen you before? Bucky looked at the young man next to him. The prison van was sent by the prison he was originally in. He even knew the person driving the van. However, the prison guard next to him seemed to be a stranger. Speaking of which, other than this guard, he did not seem to have any impression of the others. Yes, is there a problem? The prison guard then responded. Bucky shrugged and said, Listen, when you go back, arrange hot water for me immediately. I want to take a bath and have a midnight snack, otherwise I won't be able to sleep. Also, let Pauline come to my room tonight. Who's Pauline? The prison guard asked curiously. Bucky said casually, She's the secretary of the prison warden's office, don't you know? The prison guard didn't speak, just frowned. At this time, Bucky suddenly said, Stop, stop. Cage, stop the car. Do you hear me? The driver looked back through the iron fence. Boss Bucky, we'll be back to the prison in half an hour. Why stop the car at this time? Shit, I need to pee. Bucky frowned and said, I just remembered that I wanted to go to the toilet in the theater, but I haven't gone yet. No, I can't stand it anymore. Stop the car, or I won't be able to control myself. Boss Bucky, can't you bear it? After all, we're almost there. The driver tried hard. Bucky said fiercely, Do you want to die? I'm about to pee. Cage, I'm telling you, if you don't stop and let me wet my pants, you'll pack up and get out of here. Don't even think about getting your pension. It's not easy to stop the car. Cage looked at the prison guards in the prison van with an awkward expression. The prison guard said indifferently, "Then let him take care of it. Otherwise, he'll dirty the place." All right then, the prison van stopped on the side of the road. As soon as the van stopped, Bucky hurriedly ran out. His hands were only handcuffed, so it didn't affect him from unbuttoning his pants. Bucky looked around. It was a desolate place, with only an advertisement board on the side of the road. He shook his head and went straight to the billboard. He took out his weapon and prepared to pee. However, just as he was about to relieve himself, Bucky suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach. Damn, did I eat something dirty when I was at the bar? Bucky had to turn back because of the pain in his stomach. Do you have any tissues? Shit. The moment he turned around, Bucky saw that the prison guard had pointed a pistol at his back at this time. He was so scared that he rolled on the ground without saying a word. He didn't care that the ground was just wet because of him. He rolled directly to the other side of the billboard. Damn it. The prison guard stamped his foot. It's just a second later. Why did this guy suddenly turn back? But it was not the time to be annoyed, so he quickly chased after Bucky with his men. When the few prison guards went around, they found that they could no longer see Bucky. However, the prison guards saw another figure quickly get on the prisoner van. It's him. Bucky did run back to the prison van and was in the driver's seat. He looked at the panicked Coach Cage and quickly said, "Listen, Cage, I don't care if you want to kill me or not, but I can give you a chance. I have a lot of money. If I can get out of here safely, I can give you more money than you can spend in a lifetime. So run."